was the summer of 2012 in Damascus, and for the people of Syria, it certainly seemed like all the predictions about the end of the world were coming true. The Syrian civil war was raging between multiple rebel groups, and the dictator Bashar al-Assad, whose government was shelling its own people, as well as using chemical weapons and brutal campaigns of violence across the country in hopes of quelling the rebellion. Little did they know, amidst all this pain and bloodshed, something even more dangerous was brewing. An anomalous phenomenon in the sunny plains north of Damascus that may pose a threat to all of humanity someday. A threat known to the SCP Foundation as SCP-3989, the Bone Orchard. This temporal and spatial anomaly was discovered a few years earlier in 2009, before the Syrian civil war even officially began. It's strange for a highly dangerous Keter-class anomaly to be discovered under such seemingly mundane circumstances. The SCP Foundation first became aware of SCP-3989 after a small olive orchard owner sold a strangely high amount of olives that shouldn't have been possible when compared to his reported number of Olea europaea olive trees. Field agents were dispatched to question the owner about his sudden success, but he was resistant to questioning. The agents began a covert surveillance operation to figure out what was actually going on here, at which point they discovered a considerable spatial anomaly. The olive orchard was far bigger on the inside. The property was seized by the Foundation for containment. The owner had no real knowledge of the spatial anomaly. It's likely he just decided not to look a gift horse in the mouth while making money hand over fist from the extra olives he sold. The owner was given amnestics and a new life, as the Foundation began to study this anomaly, which was now labeled SCP-3989. To this day, no researcher has been able to figure out the origin of 3989's anomalous qualities. It was first given a Euclid class designation and cordoned off from the public with a simple chain-link fence, while Foundation investigations were underway on the inside. On a map, the plot of land the olive farm should occupy is about 5 square acres, but this plot contains an unseen portal to a pocket dimension within its 12-meter active zone, which doesn't follow the same spatial laws that our reality does. This subdimension, known as SCP-3989-A, is a hotbed of fascinating anomalous activity. Upon discovery of this hot zone, the Foundation established the nearby Area 126 as a research center and a makeshift containment facility for any anomalous entities captured from SCP-3989-A. It seemed like the Foundation really had a handle on this situation, but they were blissfully unaware of the true horrors lurking within SCP-3989-A. But they'd soon find out, in the most horrifying way possible. Dr. Farah Ghazali was assigned to head the research into the anomalous zone within 3989, and naturally, he began organizing fact-finding expeditions into the heart of the affected area. The first guinea pig to head into the hot zone was former Foundation agent Hosea Herrick, who'd been demoted to the lowly D-class position of D-126-15 due to failures on a previous mission. With a remote link to Dr. Ghazali, Herrick was forced to venture into the active anomalous zone to collect footage and samples of the flora and fauna within. The first thing Herrick noticed on his expedition was the strange quality of the olive trees within the active zone. The bark was a stark white, and the leaves a bloody red. Up close, Herrick could see that the trunks and branches of the trees had undergone a process known as ossification, where the material slowly becomes bone or bone-like tissue. Hence the anomaly's creepy name, the Bone Orchard. These ossified trees became known as SCP-3989-1. Herrick also made another discovery. All over the trees and ground were worm-like creatures that looked like long maggots that the Foundation dubbed SCP-3989-1A. Agent Herrick then noticed something was off about the leaves of the ossified trees. They were beating. He looked closer and they appeared to be heart tissue filled with pumping veins. Dr. Ghazali ordered Herrick to take a branch for testing, and when he did, the tree began to bleed. When he looked down, he saw that the worm-like creatures that covered the ground were now crawling up his legs. Ignoring orders from Dr. Ghazali, Herrick fled from the active zone in terror. As he left, Dr. Ghazali caught something in the corner of Herrick's body cam footage, a long white hind limb disappearing behind a tree. Back in our normal dimension, Tests on the sample Herrick collected yielded more upsetting discoveries. Genetically, the trees were identical to humans, the trunks were human bone, and the leaves really were made of human heart tissue. Fascinated and just a little bit horrified, Dr. Ghazelli authorized further expeditions into 3989-A. This time, though, Agent Herrick would be accompanied by another D-Class, and both would be armed with handguns and protective body armor. As it would turn out, this expedition would be even more horrifying than the first. As the two D-Classes explored the active zones to collect further samples, they found that the worms were responsible for the ossification of the otherwise non-anomalous olive trees. They consumed the wood little by little and deposited human bone matter in return. Herrick and his companion also noticed that these trees were beginning to bear fruit. Dr. Ghazelli ordered Herrick to collect some of this fruit for testing, but when they attempted to remove the fruit, it burst, releasing more worm creatures. It seemed that the converted trees acted as incubators for their egg sacs. Before the duo could return with the samples they were able to take, the creature that had been spotted on Herrick's body cam during the first mission finally appeared. It was huge, with long white limbs and no facial features except for a huge mouth. It grabbed Herrick's companion and literally ate the top half of his body in a single bite before dropping his legs to the ground. This horrifying beast, and the many others like it, would later be designated as SCP-3989-2A. Herrick pulled out his sidearm and shot the creature several times. The creature ignored the bullets though, and charged Herrick. The feed from his body cam cut out soon after. Both men were declared killed in action, and in recognition of his sacrifice, Josiah Herrick was posthumously reinstated to his old position in the Foundation. Job well done, Agent. Dr. Ghazelli, meanwhile, prepared for the next mission. This time, knowing of the clear dangers present within the Bone Orchard, Dr. Ghazelli recruited the help of MTF Zeta-9, aka the Mole Rats. 3 members, referred to as Charlie Team, were sent into the anomalous zone, once again remotely directed by Dr. Ghazelli. They were equipped with experimental ultrasound technology, so they could scan the fruit of the trees within 3989-A without breaking any and incurring the wrath of 3989-2A, which seemed to act as sentries for the trees. Early on in their journey, they found the body of Agent Herrick crucified against one of the ossified trees, his skin covered in mysterious symbols that were likely of Sarkic origin. While we don't have time to fully explore Sarkicism, that will require a video explanation all of its own. All you need to know is that it's a dangerous religious cult that worships flesh and disease and has close ties to similar dangerous anomalies, like SCP-610, also known as the Flesh That Hates. People familiar with that SCP will note eerily strange similarities to some of the things the mole rats were about to encounter. As Charlie Team explored, they saw a huge number of 3989-2As observing them with eyeless faces from between the ossified trees. They pressed on until they discovered what seemed to be an entirely new kind of tree within the Bone Orchard. SCP-3989-2 were huge trees made out of what appears to be enlarged human spines in place of a trunk. The smaller twigs on the tree were made from heart and lung tissue, and the whole thing was covered in what appeared to be human amniotic sacs. Charlie Team attempted to use their ultrasound scanners to discover the contents of these sacs, but one of them exploded in the process, releasing an entirely new variety of monster. From the sacs emerged the larval stage of SCP-3989-2B, smaller humanoid monsters with no faces, no sensory organs, 2 pelvises, 4 legs, and an exposed spine. Suddenly, Charlie Team could feel a horrifying Sarkic presence around them, which one member of the team described as being like someone grabbing her liver and giggling in her face. As the various monsters of the Bone Orchard began to converge on the team, the voice of the Sarkic prophet of war and the hunt, Orc, began sounding in their ears. He was beckoning them to join him. While Charlie Team fled from the active zone, Dr. Ghazelli felt increasingly drawn into it. He heard the voice of Orc, and he liked what he heard. Little by little, the workers of Area 126 were losing their minds, manipulated by the Sarkic power of the Bone Orchard right next to them. day after day. They were no longer loyal to the Foundation. They wanted to serve their new dark masters. The fourth and final expedition was led by Dr. Gazzelli himself. He took a band of loyal followers and one non-believer on a quest into the active zone to find an Orcadian temple they believed was hidden in the very heart of the Bone Orchard. Once they were inside, Gazzelli and his loyalists murdered the non-believer as a sacrifice to their new master. They carried on until they eventually found what they were looking for, a giant stone temple resembling an Aztec ziggurat, dubbed SCP-3989-4. There they also encountered a new kind of monster, dubbed SCP-3989-3. These beasts were larger than the others and resembled ancient warriors. They had insect-like exoskeletal armor, horned heads, additional hind and forelimbs, and integrated bladed weapons. What Dr. Gazzelli and his companions thought would be paradise turned out to be a kind of hell as they were led into the temple, where temporal and spatial distortions broke their mind, and the multiple highly aggressive instances of SCP-3989-3, -2A, and -2B broke their bodies. The whole thing had been a horrifying trap. In that moment, back at Area 126, another fleshy, horrifying tree sprouted out of the ground in the middle of the complex. Monsters that had once been Dr. Gazzelli and his followers emerged from its amniotic sacs, and all hell broke loose throughout the complex. Soon enough, the base was crawling with monsters from the Bone Orchard and staff who'd become brainwashed Sarkic cultists working in service of Orc. Humans were gathered up to be sacrificed to the ever-growing number of anomalous trees. Things came to a head when the anomaly in Area 126 was visited by an outside agent from the Foundation, working on behalf of the Hazardous Materials Containment Liaison. Biological containment specialist Dr. Marshall Grant and his team arrived at the site and were horrified to see the Sarkic nightmare that had unfolded. They quickly engaged in a firefight with the anomalous creatures and Sarkic devotees who'd gained control over Area 126. A number of Dr. Grant's team were lost in the process, but thankfully, they were able to eventually regain control of the base and the anomalous area. After this incident, SCP-3989 was upgraded to Keter class and given a huge upgrade in security, including 4-meter-high concrete walls and a platoon-sized regiment of Mobile Task Force members with heavy weaponry. The force that took over the minds of those exposed was designated SCP-3989-5, a force so powerful that those infected are given the choice to self-terminate or be contained forever. This may seem like a somewhat happy ending to a grim tale, but one detail keeps Dr. Grant and everyone at the Foundation who is forced to deal with 3989 awake at night. According to all recent studies into the Bone Orchard, it isn't contained at all. In fact, the active zone is getting bigger. Now Dr. Seymour Tracy is an ordinary American man. He lives in a 2-bedroom home with a white picket fence in an ordinary suburban town in the Midwest. He gets up every day and goes to work. Then in the evening, he comes home to spend time with his family. From the outside, Seymour and his family couldn't be more normal. But in reality, there's something very abnormal about him, his life, and the neighborhood where he lives. Seymour Tracy isn't just some office worker. He's a researcher employed by the SCP Foundation, just like all of his neighbors. Because this isn't an ordinary neighborhood. It's a functioning Site 11 satellite facility, bought and maintained by the Foundation for the sole purpose of containing and monitoring a single SCP, SCP-3082. SCP-3082 is an ordinary treehouse, 2 meters by 2 meters in size and built from ordinary cherry wood planks, and it's located in one of the trees in the neighborhood park. You might expect that an anomaly that requires an entire suburb of people to monitor it is exceptionally difficult to contain. But the truth is, SCP-3082 is only a Euclid-class anomaly, fairly tame by Foundation standards. The fact that the houses surrounding this SCP are inhabited solely by Foundation personnel and their families is, more than anything, a way to keep up appearances of this being a completely normal neighborhood. Unlike most Foundation sites, the personnel working in this unorthodox setup around SCP-3082 are mostly researchers, and their work is just as much anthropological and diplomatic as it is scientific. As you might have guessed, SCP-3082 isn't a normal treehouse on the inside. Open up the small hatch in the wall and step through, and you'll find yourself in a much larger, grander treehouse that rests on the upper branches of an absolutely massive conifer-like tree of an unidentified species. The tree, designated as SCP-3082-1, is an incredible 160 kilometers tall, and while its own species is not known, it appears to have multiple recognizable plants grafted onto and growing out of its bark. Many of these plants are fruit-bearing, and in addition to the identifiable plants, there are also a number of pitcher plant-like flowers that collect and hold fresh water. These plants serve as sustenance for the only known inhabitants of SCP-3082, a colony of around 74 children, all between the ages of 4 and 12. These children live in a village made up of other tree houses built among the branches of SCP-3082-1, and all of them match the descriptions of children from around the United States who went missing between 1996 and the present day. Curiously, within SCP-3082's pocket dimension, the children don't physically age, and while Foundation personnel can move freely back and forth through the hatch in SCP-3082's wall, children under the age of 13 are unable to cross back through once inside the pocket dimension. It's a very extraordinary anomaly, but it was up to the very ordinary Dr. Tracy to make contact with the residents of SCP-3082. Upon entering, he discovered that the children had formed their own system of government, known as the Chief Royal Council. Dr. Tracy was introduced to many of the council's members, including Wexley Olson, age 6, a junior council member, Lucy Fujimoto, age 7, who had taken the role of city planner and resource manager, Ahmed Saeed, age 11, who served as a caretaker to the younger citizens of SCP-3082, and Rachel Jeffries, age 10, who acted as a council mediator. Through interviews with the subjects, Dr. Tracy found that all 74 of the children reported they had woken up on the porch of a treehouse after running away from troubled homes. Most of the council members had disappeared in 1996, except for Olson, who disappeared in 2005. Older residents reported that some of the treehouse that make up what is now their village were already there upon their discovery of the pocket dimension. Also pre-existing within the pocket dimension was the original leader of the Chief Royal Council, a 12-year-old girl from Ohio named Aria Morrison. The Foundation was eager to speak to Morrison, as she was seemingly the first child to discover SCP-3082. But when Dr. Tracy asked the other children where she was, they told him that they didn't know. According to Saeed and Jeffries, Morrison abandoned the colony 5 months before the Foundation's arrival. It was unclear where she could have gone, as drone exploration conducted by the Foundation revealed that SCP-3082-1 was the only large living thing for miles within the pocket dimension. While the tree was thriving, the surrounding area was mostly flat, decaying, and barren. Further research into Morrison's history showed that her younger sister, Jacqueline Morrison, had also gone missing on the same night, but there was no evidence that Jacqueline had ever entered SCP-3082. The Foundation conducted their research into the biology of SCP-3082-1 while maintaining diplomatic relations with the pocket dimension citizens. Taking advantage of the fact that adults could move freely in and out of the hatch, the Foundation started working with the Chief Royal Council to improve the weight limits on the village systems of rope bridges, as well as providing any supplies that the children might need, such as additional food, clothing, and medical equipment. These liaisons were extremely helpful for the children, many of whom had been without adult supervision or care for over a decade. Saeed, for one example, had fallen off of a bridge and broken his leg several years earlier, and had been living with the pain caused from the bone being incorrectly set ever since. However, there was an unexpected side effect of this continued contact. While the Foundation tried to remain neutral in their involvement in the policies of 3082, through Dr. Tracy's interviews, he discovered that the SCP Foundation's presence in the treehouse had caused a schism within the Chief Royal Council. The vast majority of the children, including Saeed, Jeffries, and Fujimoto, supported the Foundation's presence and wanted to work with them to find a way to leave the world of 3082 and return back to what the children called the real world. But a splinter group had developed, calling themselves the Neverland Movement. The Neverland Movement were angered by the Foundation's interference and intended to resist any attempt to return the children to civilization. Olsen had become the de facto leader of the splinter group and made no secrets about his views on the Foundation. He swore at Tracy during interviews and frequently butted heads with the rest of the council, Fujimoto in particular. At one point, Tracy overheard the two of them fighting, with Olsen arguing that Neverland gives them everything they need without any grown-ups to tell them what to do, and that they would be stupid to give that up. To which Fujimoto responded, "I was here back when we were still building the village. I was here before we had safety nets, ladders, and fences, and before we figured out how to build a treehouse that wouldn't fall apart if someone leaned on a bad wall. I was here before we knew where there was more food if we needed it. When did you get here, huh? After we knew what we were doing." Listening to the conversation, Dr. Tracy heard the children refer again to Aria Morrison in a way that suggested that she had some kind of control over the environment. In reference to the incident where Saeed had broken his leg, Fujimoto said, "Mary didn't fix his leg right, and this place didn't fix it either. Aria prayed, and you know what happened? Nothing." From this comment, the Foundation started to theorize that Aria had somehow been involved in the creation of SCP-3082, and Aria was officially designated as SCP-3082-2. One morning, when Dr. Tracy entered the treehouse and walked through the hatch to conduct further interviews, he was greeted by Olsen, who was the only child in the main treehouse at the time. Tracy asked what was wrong, and Olsen explained that the tree had started to change. A wooden slide had appeared between two of the tree's fruit-bearing branches, snapping the rope bridge and making the fruit more difficult to access. On top of that, Olsen said that the apples the trees produced were different now. They looked like apples from the outside, but now seemed to be made of cotton candy on the inside. Dr. Tracy put in a request for non-perishable foods to be sent through into the pocket dimension, fearing that further changes to the tree structure would mean the children would be deprived of enough proper nutrition to survive. Given these changes, it became apparent that more had to be done to understand the tree's physiology. An exploratory drone was sent into the dimension, with cameras and sensors collecting data on the lower parts of the tree that the children hadn't colonized. The expedition continued as normal until the drone operators spotted a hollow in the tree that had not yet been documented. The cameras detected movement inside the hollow, and on closer inspection, the operators were shocked to find it was a person. More specifically, it was Aria Morrison. The cameras were only just able to confirm her identity though, as the drone was knocked out of the sky by a falling watermelon and the feed was cut. Before the request for a replacement drone could even be approved though, the broken drone started transmitting again. In front of the camera was Morrison, clutching a roll of duct tape. She explained to the camera that she'd rewired the drone to resume the camera feed and remove some of the drone's fan blades. Using a system where the operators of the drone would rotate the remaining blades once for yes and twice for no, the Foundation was able to hold a conversation with Morrison. She confirmed much of the information that the Foundation already had on her, that she was from Ohio, and that she and her sister Jacqueline had disappeared in 1996. During the conversation, Morrison wrote down a Morse code-like system through which to communicate more complex questions and answers, and with the help of this Morrison code, the Foundation was able to conduct a series of more in-depth interviews with the subject. The first interview occurred 44 hours after first making contact, and the drone operators explained to her the nature of the SCP Foundation in basic terms. They assured her that the other children were still safe in the village, but Morrison didn't volunteer any more information about herself. 9 days later though, she finally told the Foundation her story. Aria and Jacqueline Morrison had a difficult childhood together. Their parents fought constantly and would often leave their sisters at home without supervision for long periods of time. Jacqueline, perhaps aided by all the time she spent alone, displayed an extremely active imagination. So active, in fact, that Aria claimed she was able to pull things out of thin air, warping reality around her to fit her imagined scenarios. Aria recalled that one year when the Morrison parents had forgotten Jacqueline's birthday, Aria tried to comfort her by saying that the family had been planning a surprise party for Jacqueline's half-birthday instead. She forgot all about the white lie until 6 months later, when the girls' parents took them to the park and everything Arya had told Jacqueline would be at her half-birthday was there waiting for them. Knowing the potential consequences of letting Jacqueline's power go unchecked, Arya always made sure to remind her sister to turn things back to normal after they played pretend together. One night in 1996, while their parents were having a particularly bad fight, the sisters packed a bag and ran off into the woods. After about half an hour, they got turned around, but they kept walking, just as afraid of what would happen to them if they went back home as they were of being lost in the woods. Arya lost track of Jacqueline for a moment and suddenly found herself standing on the porch of SCP-3082. Unable to find Jacqueline anywhere, Arya searched the treehouse and in the process became trapped in SCP-3082's pocket dimension. The treehouse inside the pocket dimension appeared exactly as it does now, but the rest of the tree was devoid of life. Scared, alone, and running out of water, Arya sat in the treehouse and, pretending that her sister was with her, started telling a bedtime story about fruit trees and pitchers of fresh water. The next day, she awoke to find a system of rope bridges and a grove where SCP-3082-1's fruit-bearing trees and pitcher plants had sprouted overnight. Arya found that when it was in a giving mood, the tree would respond to any requests she made. More children started to appear over time, and they started making additions to the village with the tree's help. They would get what they needed to survive, but the tree refused to let them go. In Arya Morrison's own words, "Jacqueline likes it too much here in Neverland. I think Jackie might listen better if I get closer to the part of her that remembers. But for now, she doesn't hear me when I say it's time to go home. Trees don't really think like people do." And so, the children continue to live in the world of SCP-3082 to this day, as a whole town of SCP Foundation personnel work to bring them back. And hopefully, if they are able to return to the real world, they'll find it's the world they deserve. Have you ever been walking on the beach and happened upon a tide pool? Suddenly you find an entire world contained in that little pool of water. Little creatures swimming around and going about their lives, completely oblivious to the giant watching them from above. There's also something incredible about that. The way whole worlds can exist inside something so small. In the Central Sahara Desert, the SCP Foundation discovered a tiny world of their own like nothing anyone had ever seen before. SCP-6011, also known as the Flat Earth. SCP-6011 is a circular area hanging about 5 centimeters in the air. The radius of the area spans roughly 500 meters and is buried 156 meters below the ground within a deposit of limestone. The SCP exists as a two-dimensional plane, three-dimensional objects passing through as if they were not there at all. All of the materials found within SCP-6011, both organic and inorganic, resemble their three-dimensional counterparts. There are a wide variety of living organisms within SCP-6011, designated SCP-6011-1. The smallest instance of SCP-6011-1 resembles ordinary Earth-based single-celled organisms. The most notable species of SCP-6011-1 is referred to as Plana hominem, the closest thing SCP-6011 has to human beings. Members of Plana hominem resemble the side profile of a human, with a visible head that includes a brain, a nose, and an eye. They also have distinct muscular, lymphatic, respiratory, digestive, nervous, endocrine, cardiovascular, urinary, and reproductive systems. The only way for Plana hominem to move is via several cilia-like structures that they can also use to pick up objects. Dr. McAllis was assigned to head the research into SCP-6011 and its various residents. In pursuit of further knowledge of Plana hominem, Dr. McAllis decided to select a subject to interview about the nature of SCP-6011. He settled on an educated individual named Iotis and decided to initiate contact. Iotis was playing a game alone in his office when Dr. McAllis played a short, high-pitched noise on a speaker suspended 5 centimeters above them. Startled by the sound, Iotis reacted, calling out, "Pardon?" When Dr. McAllis spoke, Iotis was immediately perplexed and frightened, unable to see where his voice was coming from. He moved around the room, feeling the walls, searching for the source of the mysterious voice as Dr. McAllis insisted that they move to the north and stop looking. Iotis threatened to call the police, accusing Dr. McAllis of being a thief who had invaded his home. Dr. McAllis attempted to calm Iotis down, reminding him that his yelling would disturb his son and daughter. This only upset the subject further, and he accused McAllis of being a stalker in addition to a thief. Finally, Dr. McAllis was able to subdue the subject by insisting that he was not a thief or a stalker, but a messenger. He promised no harm would come to Iotis or his family if they would just listen to what he had to say. McAllis identified himself as a doctor, bonding with Iotis over their shared education. Iotis requested that McAllis show himself, and since he was unable to do so, he briefly lowered a mechanical piston into the surface of SCP-6011. Though McAllis was unable to cross into SCP-6011, this allowed him to introduce a physical presence into the area. After their conversation, Iotis agreed to participate in another interview. This particular conversation was cut short when two police officers approached the house after noise complaints from the neighbors. Iotis called out to McAllis as he left, referring to him as Angel. Following this initial contact and the interview that ensued, Dr. McAllis and his team performed several other interviews with Iotis. As more information was collected via observation and conversation, McAllis decided to put together a seminar and a Q&A with junior researchers at the Foundation regarding the details of SCP-6011. During the seminar, Dr. McAllis explained the nature of SCP-6011 and its discovery. It was first happened upon by Italian colonial forces in 1912. At the time, they thought it was an extended form of the cave system, but the Foundation knew better. After introducing the junior researchers to SCP-6011, McAllis provided more information on Iotis himself. He made it clear that Iotis is not to be mocked for assuming McAllis to be an angel, explaining it this way. Imagine someone suddenly appearing within your house. Imagine someone describing the direct shape of your insides while informing you what your relative across the country is doing. Would you not also cry out, "Angel, Angel, where are you, Angel?" After this introductory portion, and taking a moment to plug his book, The Life in Plane, which was co-authored by Iotis himself, McAllis opened the floor to questions. One of the junior researchers asked why the residents of SCP-6011 looked so human. McAllis responded with a question of his own. Do they even look human? Or is it natural for our brain to make connections between vaguely humanoid-shaped objects as we want to feel a sense of familiarity with them? McAllis confirmed that after a significant amount of testing, SCP-6011 is definitely two-dimensional. Somehow, it has no width. Because of this dimensional difference between SCP-6011 and the ordinary world, nothing should be removed from the boundaries of the flat world. Forcing a two-dimensional object or being into our world would cause it to either rearrange itself to fit into a three-dimensional configuration, or cause it to split apart. At best, it would become malformed. At worst, the item would undergo instantaneous nuclear fission. Nothing can be placed inside of SCP-6011 from the outside world either. Three-dimensional objects can pass through temporarily, showing only a cross-section of the object. The Foundation advises against attempting to place any objects inside, as it would change the enthalpy of the system. During his observation of SCP-6011, as well as his interviews with Iotis, Dr. McAllis uncovered a wide variety of facts about life inside the flat Earth. The Plana Hominum live in a feudal society, where people are born into a class position, and the role of the parents is passed along to their offspring. The social hierarchy is broken down into estates. The estates are indicated by a color applied under the skin of each person at their birth. There is no opportunity for upward mobility or for fall from grace, only to stay in the position one is born into. Those of the red estate belong to the monarchy of SCP-6011. The orange are the administrators, the yellow are priests, scribes, and record keepers. The green are similar to the middle class of 18th century Europe, encompassing teachers, physicians, lawyers, and other educated professionals. Blue are merchants, tradesmen, and skilled workers, and purple are the manual laborers. Because of the difficulty of accomplishing tasks in only two dimensions, the upper-class citizens have at least 2 servants apiece. All servants come from the estates ranked below green. Because physical writing is difficult in the boundaries of SCP-6011, members of the yellow caste are trained as voice scribes. They memorize and repeat large amounts of information, such as entire books, transcriptions of speeches, or laws. Entertainment in SCP-6011 is largely voice-based as well, with visual theaters considered a luxury only for the highest-class citizens. The entertainment of the common people is found in the voice theater. a place where entertainment is structured around dialogue and the sound of artificially created ambiance. Naturally, the Foundation does not want any civilians stumbling on SCP-6011. Though it poses no threat to humanity, knowledge of its existence could cause chaos and could very well endanger the inhabitants of SCP-6011. Site-044 was set up around SCP-6011 in order to protect it. No construction is permitted within a 10-kilometer radius of the area, under a cover story about the Libyan government blocking off the area for conservation purposes. SCP-6011 is stored in a hermetically sealed chamber, away from external influences. All interactions with SCP-6011 or any of the organisms living within it must be approved by the head researcher of Provisional Site-044. A monitoring system is set up perpendicular to SCP-6011, so that the research team can keep an eye on the activity inside without disturbing the residents. The monitoring system is, unfortunately, not without its flaws. One day there was a malfunction in the system that caused the breakdown of the camera rails, and several metallic components came loose and plunged into the surface of SCP-6011. There was no damage, but the objects were seen by several civilians. The Foundation was concerned that the sight of massive pieces of mysterious objects appearing and disappearing suddenly in a public space would cause mass panic among the people of SCP-6011. However, the research team was shocked to see the two-dimensional people carrying on with their ordinary day-to-day lives. They performed an anti-cognitohazard screening in order to determine what was causing this strangely placid response to what should have been a devastating shock to the people. They discovered a large building, hidden by a form of visual cognitohazard, shaped like an octagon. Further monitoring of this unusual building captured a voice recording of a scribe, reciting an account of the monitor equipment disaster. Soon after, Iotis was removed from his home by officers that refused to disclose what organization they were working for. All of this, the building, the arrest, the report of the incident was traced to a secret organization operating inside of SCP-6011. Known as the Doctors of the Church. The group was made up of yellow and orange estate members, with a small selection of green, blue, and purple field agents. The research team could not help but notice how similar the Doctors of the Church are to the Foundation itself. Their mission statements are very much the same, upholding the veil of secrecy between the unusual and the population they have sworn to protect, while working to understand the anomalies that they are trying to conceal. All three-dimensional interlopers are scrubbed from the public consciousness or hidden from the people at large. Further research indicated that the incident would have completely destroyed 6011 if the Doctors of the Church had not worked to deploy reality anchors to keep the baseline reality of the world intact. Dr. McAllis wrote about this group, affectionately nicknamed the Little Foundation, saying, "When I look at them, I see, well, us." And a little crumb of limestone falling from the ceiling of the karst or a bug somehow making its way onto the surface of SCP-6011, phasing in and out of existence must have terrified them. And so they found a way to conceal all that was illogical from the general public, as did we. The reality of SCP-6011 raises some fascinating, if a bit troubling, questions. What dimensions are there that we have no knowledge of? Just as the two-dimensional beings cannot conceive of us, what four-dimensional beings, five-dimensional beings, and so on might be out there that we can't begin to wrap our heads around? To a creature with no concept of a third dimension, creatures that exist within our world seem like angels or even gods. Perhaps the things in this world we cannot explain are simply creatures that exist in more dimensions than we are able to conceive of. Truly, there may be no difference between the Little Foundation and the SCP Foundation that we know. Looking down at the residents of SCP-6011 and all that they think they know might encourage us to feel superior. Instead, it should make us curious, and perhaps even make us afraid of what we might be unable to understand. Dr. McAllis summarized his thoughts on SCP-6011 in its file. We had prior interactions with entities that claimed to originate from higher geometrical dimensions, yet our mind was never really capable of understanding them. Where we stand, we have the capability to imagine the lives of those in the two-dimensional space. Sadly, the same cannot be said for our understanding of the four-dimensional reality. It is often said that the human brain is like a computer. So just like a computer can never completely emulate a machine more advanced than itself, so do we lack the ability to understand higher dimensions. To a creature outside of our understanding, We are the citizens of the flat earth, shuffling back and forth, unable to see that which lies beyond. What makes someone a hero? There is never just one answer to that question. Some will tell you that it's selflessness, putting other people before oneself, that makes someone heroic. Others believe that heroism takes someone with a clear sense of morality, the ability to tell right from wrong with absolute certainty. Perhaps a hero should also be a symbol, a paragon of hope and virtue for all of society to look up to and aspire to be. And then there are those who would argue that a person can't possibly be a hero unless they possess one key trait, whether that comes as a result of a freak accident, gamma radiation exposure, or mutated genes. Being blessed with extraordinary powers and the will to use them for good might just be what elevates a moral, selfless, and symbolic hero into something more: a superhero. It is rare that the SCP Foundation encounters an anomalous creature or entity that it considers to be harmless. There are, of course, exceptions, but perhaps even more of a rarity is an SCP that seeks to go out of its way and use its anomalous abilities to do good. So many of the creatures and entities kept contained by the Foundation have malicious intent, like damage-regenerating reptiles with contempt for humanity, and eldritch beings with desires to take over this dimension. But then there is SCP-2800, or as he prefers to call himself, Cactusman, the Spiked Menace. Partially human and part succulent plant, SCP-2800 is one of a rare breed of SCPs, one that aims to help people, rather than killing them, enslaving them, or wiping reality as we know it from existence. And as you might be surprised to learn that this superhero known as Cactusman began life as one Daniel McIntyre, an average guy from Scotland. Little is known about Daniel's origin story. All superheroes have one, of course, but as far as Foundation researchers are aware, Cactusman wasn't jettisoned in a pod from his dying homeworld to the safety of Earth. It is also safe to assume he didn't get pricked by a radioactive cactus or have his DNA infused with a plant during a genetic experiment. He was first encountered by the SCP Foundation whilst they were trying to contain another SCP, a reality-warping object that had somehow breached containment. What Foundation staff tracking the object witnessed was Cactusman attempting to assault the escaped SCP, to little success. Following this encounter, Foundation personnel convinced Cactusman to allow them to contain him. He complied, was designated as SCP-2800, and researchers began investigating the nature of this strange would-be superhero. According to Daniel, one day his powers just happened, with little understanding as to how, why, or what had caused this transformation. When asked about how he acquired his powers during an interview with SCP Foundation researcher Dr. Love, Daniel said, "To be honest, Doc, I don't know. I woke up one day and boom, cactus powers. Thought I might as well use them for good, right? I always grew up reading a lot of comic books. Always loved the X-Men as a little kid, so I thought I was one of them. I thought I was the luckiest guy in the world, ending up with superpowers. Doesn't every kid wish they could be a superhero?" Analysis by Foundation research staff revealed that Daniel's DNA had somehow merged with the genome of a Carnegie gigantea plant, or a saguaro cactus. This plant is usually what most people picture if they were to imagine a typical cactus, and is known to be native to the Sonoran Desert, as well as the Mexican state of Sonora. How one became part of Daniel McIntyre's genetic makeup is baffling. It seems highly unlikely that a saguaro cactus would grow naturally in Scotland, given that the country has a far damper and colder climate than the scorching hot deserts that saguaros normally thrive in. Regardless of exactly how Daniel became fused with a cactus, his body shares a number of the same physical properties of the plant. Pointed spikes protrude from his skin, which can grow to just over an inch in length. It seems that SCP-2800 can either remove these spikes manually with little pain, or will eventually shed them naturally over time, allowing more to regrow in their place. As well as outwardly looking like an anthropomorphic cactus, SCP-2800 also shares various biological traits with his cacti counterparts. Daniel's body no longer functions in the same way as that of an ordinary human being in a number of different ways. Firstly, he is able to perform photosynthesis, deriving the necessary nutrients he requires from direct sunlight. This negates the need for him to consume any food, and prevents him from feeling hunger or the fatigue this can often bring. Additionally, his altered biology allows Cactusmen to store more water than would normally be possible for the average human, and he requires less of it too. SCP-2800 is able to keep himself hydrated with a third of the required fluids for an average person. Daniel can also adapt to more arid environments, with drier climates and above-average levels of heat having little impact on his abilities. Speaking of abilities, SCP-2800 is not just a man with the physical and biological traits of a saguaro cactus. He also has superpowers that seem, well, let's say, inspired by a cactus. While perhaps not as flashy as being faster than a speeding bullet, more powerful than a locomotive, or able to leap tall buildings in a single bound, Cactusman does possess his own unique set of superhuman abilities. Derived, like his other traits, from his part saguaro DNA, SCP-2800 has the power to empathetically communicate with other plant life. Unlike telepathy and the ability to communicate solely through thoughts, empaths like Cactusman are able to influence or interpret the emotions or moods of others. So similar, but a little more subtle in its effectiveness. Cactusman might have superhuman powers, altered DNA, and a mysterious origin, but another part of a hero's journey is the struggle, and SCP-2800 is no exception to this either. Despite his desire to do good, he harbors a lot of unrest under that prickly exterior. After extensive psychological examination by the researchers at the SCP Foundation, Daniel was diagnosed with 2 distinct mental disorders. The first of these is dysmythia, or chronic depression, with the other being a condition colloquially known as hero syndrome. Hero syndrome, as its name suggests, is often characterized by an unstoppable pathological urge to help people, usually ignoring any risks to oneself in the pursuit of assisting even total strangers. Some with this disorder will even attempt to manufacture dangerous scenarios in order to act like the hero, and earn themselves recognition and praise for reacting heroically to the danger they secretly caused. Like, for example, committing arson so they can save people from a burning building. SCP-2800 has never attempted anything like this so far, but Cactusman does express an extreme willingness to help people and try to intervene in any situation that he thinks he can assist with. The problem is, SCP-2800 is hardly an experienced crime fighter, and this has put him on the receiving end of his fair share of injuries. During his first outing as Cactusman, the Spiked Menace, Daniel encountered a group engaging in the sale of illicit substances and attempted to apprehend them. While he was able to deal a cactus spine-filled blow to one of their faces, the group quickly overpowered Cactusman and beat him until local law enforcement arrived to save him. Determined to prove himself a hero, though, Daniel returned to patrolling the streets soon after, but met with the same results. Even weak, petty criminals seemed like they were too much for Cactusman to handle. While his hero syndrome compels SCP-2800 to want to do good and set a good example, it is also directly linked to his other condition, his dysmythia. By attempting and failing to be heroic, Cactusman becomes chronically depressed, yet still has the urges brought on by his hero syndrome to put himself in harm's way for the sake of others. And when he is unable to provide help, Daniel falls back into depression. It's a very difficult cycle. In the hopes of counteracting some of Daniel's struggles, the SCP Foundation have gifted him a pair of potted cacti. These occupy SCP-2800's cell with him, both oxygenating his room as well as boosting his morale. Although he has remarked that the cacti don't say much to him beyond "I'm thirsty" and "I am a cactus." Daniel has affectionately named his potted plants. They're now known as Cactilad and Spiky Girl, his sidekicks in the never-ending battle against evil. During interviews with Foundation researcher Dr. Love, Daniel admitted that he was a victim of bullying throughout much of his childhood. From a young age, he often found himself in physical altercations with bullies that singled him out and picked on him at school. Cactusman said that his experiences encouraged him to give back, and that despite having suffered at the hands of bullies, it made SCP-2800 determined to help others in need. In his own words, Daniel didn't want what happened to him to happen to anybody else, and it is highly likely that these experiences from his youth are at least part of the cause of his hero syndrome. However, another incident may also be linked to SCP-2800's condition. Despite not often prevailing against petty criminals, there is CCTV surveillance footage of Cactusman from before his containment by the SCP Foundation. The footage in question was taken at a subway close to where Daniel patrolled and looked for criminals to apprehend. In the surveillance tape, a woman and her child can be seen waiting at the subway station near a support pillar. From behind the pillar, an assailant in a mask appeared, wielding what looked to be a knife. The woman, cowering and trying to protect her child, was made to open her purse as the attacker threatened her with his knife. But then Cactusman appeared behind the man. He walked up to him and punched him in his lower back and chest. A number of SCP-2800 sharp cacti spines ended up lodged in the man's skin, causing him to drop the knife in pain. During the ensuing scuffle, SCP-2800 was able to tie the man up, thus saving the woman and her child. The woman then thanked Cactusman, shaking his hand and embracing him. Her child also expressed gratitude, with SCP-2800 kneeling down to face them and appearing to get emotional at receiving recognition. After signing an autograph for the child, Cactusman then disappeared from the scene before police arrived. Cacti have the tenacity to grow in barren desert environments, surviving on very little water. It is for that reason that to some, these plants have come to symbolize strength, resilience, and endurance. This one encounter captured in this surveillance footage may well have been one of the few times Cactusman ever succeeded at being heroic, but perhaps it is all he needed to encourage him to keep trying, to seek out wrongdoings time and time again, even if it led to him being injured. Maybe knowing that just once he had succeeded in saving a woman and her child was enough to convince him that he would one day be able to do so again. And maybe that is what makes someone a true hero, the power to endure. Legends about the end of the world often come with the sounds of thundering hooves and the approach of four horsemen: war, famine, pestilence, death. They will descend on the world and usher in the end of days. It's a terrifying idea, these horsemen bringing darkness and decay wherever they go, as the world collapses all around them. We all hope that we'll never see the day that the four horsemen come. Unfortunately, some lucky people out there have already encountered their own version of the horsemen of the apocalypse. Shadowy riders with inhuman strength that follow disaster, destruction, and untold suffering. The SCP Foundation came across a series of journal entries written by Dave Harkand, an infantryman in the British Expeditionary Force during World War I. That First World War was a nightmare for all who fought in it. A sea of bloodshed and gunfire. Young men crouched terrified in foxholes and wondering when death would finally come for them. The horrors of war are notable, but not exactly the sort of thing the SCP Foundation preoccupies itself with. So what was so captivating, so specifically terrible, about Dave Harkand's journals? They described his experiences over the course of the Battle of the Somme, and an anomaly he encountered there that was unlike anything he had ever seen. No military training, no combat experience could have prepared him for what was waiting, hiding in the fog of war. His first journal entry began on a lighthearted note, or as lighthearted as one can be in the face of combat. June 27th, 1916. Finally arrived at the front. I picked up this little journal while I was in Paris. Figured I might as well keep record of my heroics on the battlefield. Quite chuffed to finally be in action, though it seems I'm the only one. Most of these blokes have been fighting for a couple months now, and they look downright dreadful. Mud all over the uniform and their faces are so pale, look like they haven't eaten or slept for months. A few days later, he began to hear stirrings amongst his fellow soldiers, and strange sounds that rocked their barracks. He described the first unsettling incident. July 2nd, 1916. Woke in the early hours of the morning. Ground was shaking. Damn near shook me out into the muck on the dugout floor. Poor blokes in the bunks on the other side looked like they had seen a ghoul. Pair of Northern Irish lads from Kitchener's armies, if I remember right, kept muttering about a nuckety, both gripping a gold crucifix. Was about to lay my head back down and get a wink of shut-eye when I ended up scrambling into the mud. Loudest damn thing I'd ever heard. Thought it was the Hun artillery about to mark us with a whiz-bang. Only problem was, never did get the bang. This morning asked our brass hat about the artillery barrage. Gave me a funny look, and asked what the bloody hell I was talking about. The next day, Dave went searching for the source of the loud sound. He didn't find any evidence of artillery, but instead found something he had never seen before. It was a crater, shaped like a giant horse's hoof. He brushed it off as just another oddity of the battlefield. A bit strange, but nothing to be concerned about. There were more important things at hand anyway. The next day, he finally saw combat firsthand, and things only got more bizarre and frightening. July 3rd, 1916. Huns made a push today. First time they've moved into our region. First time I'd ever seen combat. It's not romantic and adventurous. It's terrifying and deadly. My hands can't stop shaking. Already messed up the shit once. The Huns had our outfit up against a wall. Damn near overran us. Didn't help that it rained that night before making our foxhole filled to the brim with muck. One of the Frits came right at me and I put one right between his eyes. Fell right at the edge of the trench. I had to look at him in the eyes. Poor lad couldn't have been more than 17 or 18. Martin, one of the Irish lads, is gone. Was unlike anything I'd ever seen. One moment he's standing shooting at Huns, all of a sudden the mud starts boiling. Before anyone can react, mud just flies everywhere. Everyone else is suddenly knocked down off their feet. I look up, and he's just gone. Wasn't even body parts left. Haven't told anyone, but I'd swear that there were bones coming from underneath him right before the mud went flying. His mate, Brendan, was digging in the mud for hours looking for the crucifix. Martin's body was never found, no matter how they searched. A little over a week later, things got even worse. July 14th and 15th, 1916. Huns tried to push this morning in the rain. I was in the machine gun nest with Brendan, the other Irish chap in my unit. They kept coming and getting stuck in the mud, and I just kept shooting. Sun is rising. I'm on watch till at least 8. At least that's what the brass hat said. I've started losing track of how much time's been passing. There's something out there. Something lurking out in the mud and dead Huns. Nearly dozed off last night listening to the moans of the blighty wounded stuck out in no man's land. Poor souls got left behind. Saw something out of the edge of my vision. Something big. Couldn't quite make it out. It was much darker than usual. Overcast sky was obscuring the full moon. Heard a couple of screams, but whatever it was gone before my flare hit the sky. This would not be Dave's last sighting of the large, dark figure. This mysterious shadow would appear again several days later, and there would be more of them. July 30th, 1916. I've been seeing them at the edge of my vision ever since that first night. They're huge. They move so damn fast that they're gone before I can get a clear look, or at least that's how it was mucking out until today. Thick fog and mist rolled in this morning, blanketed everything. We figured the Huns might use it to launch another push. Bastards have been pushing non-stop since the 20th. Saw it through the fog. Looked like a shadow hiding in the mist. Some sort of horse-like creature with something dragging along the ground, and a giant lump where the rider would sit. Said the lump started moving. Could have sworn it was a person or something that looked like a person. Sat up, and the things dragging along the ground reached out in front of it and picked up something. Thought it was a couple dead Jerrys, until they started squirming. I'll never forget the noise it made. Louder than a banshee, shrill and twisted. It looked right at me. 2 pairs of red glowing orbs. 2 weeks after meeting eyes with this chilling apparition, Dave wrote a short note in his journal. August 5th, Brendan calls them knucklaves. Won't tell me much more than that. Beginning to understand why all these blokes looked so terrified when I first arrived. It wasn't until another week passed that Dave would truly begin to understand just what kind of monster he was up against. Not the enemy soldiers, but something far more horrible. Something inhuman. August 13th. Bloody hell, the nightmares. Been on watch 2 nights in a row. One just appeared right there, right in front of me. 20 feet, had to be at least 20 feet away. Towering into the sky. Got my flare to go off in time just to see it pick up a couple wounded Jerrys in the mud. They don't have bloody skin. They're just muscle and fat. The thing on its back wasn't human. No way it could be human. Had no skin either. No legs, just merged straight into the horse at the stomach. I took a couple shots at it with my rifle. Did absolutely nothing. Like I was shooting it with a slingshot. It stopped as my flare reached its highest point and turned. Looked straight down at me. Both the horse and the thing on its back. It smiled. He tried to warn his superiors. Tried to warn of the horrors he was seeing and the danger he felt they posed. But they wouldn't listen. Night after night, the creatures came back. August 17th, 1916. Been assigned night watch the past 4 nights straight. Tried to tell the brass hat about the knucklaves. Didn't believe me. Said it was the shell shock playing with my head. Had to put a sock in it and keep on. It keeps coming back. Every night. Same spot 20 feet in front of me. Picks up wounded Jerrys, turns and looks, and then it's gone. He plays with me. I'm sure of it. Last night there was another one too. 4 of those things on its back did the same damn thing. A few days later, Dave spotted something that made his blood run cold. 7 a.m.
August 20th, 1916. Jerry's made a big push yesterday. Rained 2 days ago all day, so the muck was deep. We were on the machine gun again in the pillbox. So many of them in no man's land last night. Couldn't tell the dead from the living. Haven't slept in 6 days. There were 5 tonight. 3 of them had more than one of those things on their back. The one that keeps coming back dropped something. Saw it shine in the flare light. 10 a.m., August 20th, 1916. Went out into the mud where it appears every night. Found Martin's crucifix and tin hat. Whatever this thing was, it had taken Martin. It seemed to want Dave to know that too. It left behind Martin's lost things for him to find, as if it was gloating, as if it already knew that it had won. August 20th, 1916. They're getting bold. Saw one out in broad daylight. Pretty sure it was the same one. Buried itself in the mud, just lying there, waiting. We're going over the top at 3. There are more out there now, all doing the same thing. God help us. Dave Harkland was declared missing in action on August 20th, 1916, following an attempted counterattack against the German forces. Another soldier from his unit, Brendan O'Malley, was also reported missing in action on the same day. Though Dave's body was never recovered, his journal was found 20 feet away from the edge of the German trenches 2 months later. Poor Dave Harkland had no idea what he and the rest of his fellow soldiers encountered out there. He didn't live to learn more, but he came face to face with SCP-3456. SCP-3456 is not one being, but rather a group of quadrupeds that vaguely resemble horses. From a distance, their silhouette looks like that of a horse with a human riding on its back. However, once the observer gets closer, they will notice some disturbing differences. These creatures do not look like any ordinary horse. They are smooth and hairless, with translucent skin and 3-toed hooves. Anyone unfortunate enough to get close to one of these creatures will be able to see through their skin to the blood vessels and muscle underneath. They will also notice that there is no rider perched atop the creature's back at all. The humanoid shape is part of the creature's body, an extension of them, fused to its back. The humanoid figure consists of a pair of long arms, which drags along the ground as the creature moves, and a head. The arms end in sharpened bones rather than fingers, and the head has mostly human features, with the exception of a hole where the nose should be. The creatures vary greatly in size, with the largest on record measuring at a height of 30 meters and a width of 15. They appear to be invulnerable, at least when it comes to any traditional human weaponry they have currently been exposed to. Gunfire, explosives, swords and arrows, and even nuclear blasts seem to have no effect. If you happen to get a good look at one of these bulletproof abominations in person, then I am so sorry. You are as good as gone. Because once you have seen one of these creatures, they have also seen you, and they will not stop until they have taken you. They will track you, stalk you, hide buried in mud and nestled in bushes. They will wait for the opportune moment, and they will reach out with their unnaturally long arms, smiling with no lips as their blood-red eyes burn like hellfire, and you will disappear forever. They will travel far beyond the site where they first appeared, until they have finally captured their prey. This isn't an SCP-096 situation either. They aren't punishing you for seeing their face. They want to be seen, and will go out of their way to show themselves to people until they have captured as many as they want. No one knows what becomes of SCP-3456's victims, but they are never seen again. Though items once belonging to the missing people may resurface, their bodies are never found. There is only one way to escape from SCP-3456, and that is to find and cross a body of fresh water. For reasons unknown, the entities are unable or unwilling to cross rivers, streams, and lakes. The Foundation first discovered this during an operation in Iraq, in which several agents encountered a group of SCP-3456 manifestations. They fled from the monsters and quickly retreated across the Tigris River. Once they had reached the other side, they saw that the creatures had not followed them onto the bridge. Instead, they remained at the riverbank on the other side, watching and waiting. This was quickly noted and added to potential containment procedures, though the exact reason for SCP-3456's dislike of fresh water is currently unknown. In Dave Harkland's journals, his fellow soldier described the creatures as nuclaves, but would not elaborate beyond that. So what is a nuclave? The word refers to a creature from the waters of Orkney, a group of islands on the northern coast of Scotland. Their name is thought to come from an Orcadian word meaning devil of the sea, and they truly are like something out of hell. These creatures are native to the ocean and supposedly take on another form when in their natural habitat, but no one knows what they truly look like. On land, the creature is a hybrid of a man and horse, with a large snout like that of a pig, and a single red eye that burns like the embers of a fire. It has no hair or skin, just raw tissue and bone-dripping black blood. Everything about the creature is malicious and deadly, intended to bring harm and calamity to humans. Even its breath is toxic, thought to cause disease, plague, and the death of crops. As they are native to the ocean, they detest fresh water and will not cross it even in pursuit of their prey. They will also not appear when it is raining. In the legends of the Nuclave, they do have a natural enemy. A creature from Orcadian folklore known as the Mither of the Sea is said to have the power to keep the monsters from coming ashore during the summer months. The Mither, or Mother, is a benevolent force of nature, giving warmth to the oceans and life to the beings on the water and the land. Though SCP-3456 has appeared during the summer months, it has never been spotted in the Orkney region during this time of year. Perhaps this is a coincidence, but some Foundation researchers have proposed a research expedition to the area in order to look for the kindly ocean spirit. So far, this proposal has been denied. SCP-3456 is classified as Keter, and there is currently no way to effectively contain it. All previous attempts to contain or to neutralize the Horsemen have failed, though the Foundation is always looking for new methods to attempt. Currently, any personnel who see the Horsemen will be given Class G amnestics at a treatment center located within 1 kilometer of a freshwater stream, river, or lake. All references to the Horsemen have been scrubbed from historical records, and any sightings are to be blamed on PTSD, shock, and trauma-induced hysteria. Areas that are likely to attract SCP-3456, such as war zones and areas impacted by natural disasters, are to be heavily monitored by the Foundation. In the event of a disaster, Foundation personnel will be sent to help with evacuation in order to get all civilians away from SCP-3456 as quickly as possible. So what is SCP-3456? Is it the dreaded Nuclave from folktales and whispered fireside warnings? There are some notable differences between the stories and what the Foundation encountered. SCP-3456 does not seem to have come from the ocean, nor is it limited to only appearing around Orkney. These beasts seem to manifest from thin air and disappear the same way when their nasty work is done. But folklore and passing down stories often distorts things. Details change, and others are added or left out. In the original stories, the Nuclave were thought to be the cause of famines, plagues, and disasters. Perhaps it was simply drawn to these events, lured there by the scent of pure human misery. Perhaps the Nuclave is not just similar to SCP-3456, but the two are one and the same. Or perhaps they are something entirely different. Whatever the case may be, there is nothing we can do to stop them. War, famine, pestilence, and death are everywhere. They are inevitable and unfortunate parts of life on Earth. So it seems are these deadly riders, these monsters that are neither horse nor man, but still somehow both. Every time we wage war, every time disaster strikes, they will come to watch, to pick through the rubble, and to smile. Maybe we don't need to dread the coming of the Horsemen of the Apocalypse. They are already here.
Robert Orlean and his partner in crime, John Streep, zipped through the murky waters of the Louisiana Bayou on a speedboat. These men were dealers in the illicit, but their specialty was not any kind of contraband you'd probably recognize. Orlean and Streep dealt in rare orchids, illegally poached from areas where they're considered endangered and sold to high-paying rare plant collectors. As any seller or collector knows, rarity is the hallmark of value, and what these two men would encounter in the swamp that day was truly one of a kind. The problem for this pair of greedy opportunists is that only one of them would live to tell the tale, and thanks to the SCP Foundation, the other wouldn't remember it for long. That's what happens when you have a dangerous run-in with a certain mean green swamp-dwelling creature that doesn't take kindly to unwanted visitors. And no, we're not talking about a crocodile. Orlean and Streep continued through the swamp, keeping their keen eyes out for the flash of light blue that'd give away the orchids they were seeking. Little did they know, from the murky darkness between the reeds, a pair of big yellow eyes were watching them back. They were intruders in a stranger's land, threats, just like the bad man. They would need to be dealt with accordingly, or a grim history would repeat itself. The boat came to a halt as the two poachers finally saw one of the rare flowers they were looking for arising out of the muck. Orlean leaped from the boat and began wading towards his prize. The flower would fetch him and his partner a pretty penny if they could get it back in good condition. The motions were so well practiced for Orlean, so automatic, that he didn't even notice something was moving through the waters towards him. Gators and snakes were an occupational hazard for people like Orlean. He kept a revolver holstered just below his shoulder as a precaution, but the thing about to kill him was unlike anything he'd ever faced before. Just as his careful fingers curled around the orchid's stem, Orlean heard Streep screaming from the boat. He was frantically pointing at something just beyond Orlean, emerging from the reeds. Orlean turned and felt his jaw falling open in horror at the sight of it. At first it seemed almost like a waterlogged corpse. Thick, matted black hair, heavy with grease and muddy bog water, teeming with parasitic swamp life. Her skin was green and bumpy, like that of a toad, dripping with viscous green sweat that seemed like it could only be the byproduct of rot. But those eyes, those big yellow amphibian eyes, they were alive as they were inhuman. This creature wasn't a corpse, it was something else entirely. Her body cleared the water, standing at Orlean's height now and facing him eye to eye. She was naked, her dignity preserved by her long tangle of hair. Her body was human-shaped, except for her freakishly long, thin limbs. Her belly appeared visibly bloated or engorged, like a woman in the mid-stages of pregnancy. Orlean had never smelled something so foul in his entire life, which was mostly spent wading through swamps and bogs. She smelled like death itself. Streep was screaming for Orlean to climb back into the boat, but Orlean knew it was already too late. He reached for his holstered pistol, but before he could clear leather, the creature let out a horrific guttural hawking noise and spewed a stream of black goo onto Orlean's face. It was hot, sticky, and foul-tasting, like a kind of tar rendered from corpses. It plastered his open mouth and nose shut and began to suffocate him. He tried desperately to claw at his face and tear the offending substance away, but all that succeeded in doing was getting his fingers stuck. While Orlean suffocated and Streep screamed terrified obscenities from the boat, the creature just watched and smiled through rotten teeth. It was nice to see them panic, just like the bad man who'd come before. They were in the wrong. They deserved this. Orlean soon realized that nothing he could do would save himself. He'd spent his life in a dangerous profession and been lucky until now. But the Reaper catches up with everyone eventually. The last thing he saw as the world went black was this creature, this swamp woman, wading towards him through the water with a hungry look in her eye. She grabbed him on either side of his face and just held him there. What was that sound? Was it fizzling, like something was burning or even melting? She just kept staring and smiling with those awful rotten teeth. Robert Orlean went to sleep in her hands and never woke up. Back on the boat, a desperate John Streep was watching a scene that, if it wasn't for the later intervention of the SCP Foundation, would haunt him until his dying day. He watched his partner undergo a process that was somewhere between rotting and melting. He withered away in the swamp woman's hands, degrading into thick black sludge that she drank through her thirsty skin. As much as it pained him to leave his friend behind, Streep knew that there was no saving him now. All he could possibly do was escape with his own life. He pulled the ripcord on the boat's motor and tore his way back to the nearest township, the shape of the nightmarish swamp woman shrinking in the distance behind him. When he ran into the local police station, half mad with grief and fear, screaming about the monster that had killed his friend in the swamp, the police understandably detained him for further questioning. When his criminal history as a poacher was flagged up on the database, it became clear he probably wasn't leaving for a while. That's when a Foundation agent embedded in the department passed a memo about the case's strangeness up the chain of command, and a covert mobile task force was soon dispatched to the swamp in order to locate and capture the anomalous creature that Streep had claimed took his friend's life. After a few days of searching, the Swamp Woman was captured by the Foundation and redesignated as SCP-811 before being delivered back to a nearby containment site. Luckily for Foundation disinformation agents, the cover story was practically gift wrap for them on this one. It had been a dispute between two hardcore criminals, and as the saying goes, there's no honor among thieves. Streep had murdered Orlean over a pay cut dispute, and thrown him into the swamp where his body was eaten by gators. A few falsified records and implanted memories later, and the Foundation was free to do what it pleased with SCP-811. But the Swamp Woman would prove to be full of surprises and contradictions. While designated as Euclid, the containment procedures for the creature were rather extensive for its own benefit. Like a lot of creatures who'd never existed in captivity before, it had very specific needs in terms of its artificial habitat. The Foundation needed to be on top of everything from the pH levels of its soil acidity to the optimal temperatures and humidity levels of its containment chamber, built to resemble the creature's natural swamp habitat. The Swamp Woman is mostly non-aggressive to Foundation staff, but certain precautions need to be taken in order to ensure everyone's safety around her. While she's largely humanoid, her internal physiology vastly differs from that of humans. Her veins and digestive system are non-functional. She consumes her prey by melting it into black sludge with the highly caustic secretions of her skin, before absorbing it back through her pores. The waste material collects in her stomach, which she then expels voluntarily through an action similar to vomiting. This is often used defensively or in hunting prey, as the unfortunate Robert Orlean found out. As a result, people working in 811's containment chamber need to do so in pairs and wear heavily sealed hazmat suits for obvious safety reasons. The creature also proved to be surprisingly intelligent. While not a genius by any means, it was no mere mindless animal. The Swamp Woman had an intellect and communication skills on par with your average feral child, the one that had been brought up and socialized in a relatively normal home before being turned loose and experiencing a decline in its mental and social development. Her words have a childlike construction to them, as though English isn't her native language, and she's still in the very early stages of learning it. She gave herself a name, I, and began to cooperate well with Foundation staff in exchange for having her needs met. Since being brought into containment, she's made a number of requests. These include some requests that have been denied by the Foundation, such as the regular provision of bovine prey for its chamber, and a variety of fish from its native environment to make it feel more at home. However, there are some requests that the Foundation has approved, like a wooden hairbrush and a D-class in a hazmat suit entering the room daily, in order to help wash her hair, often bogged down by the frequency at which her skin produces thick, caustic oils. In one particularly strange request, she asked for a turtle in a hazmat suit to act as a companion in her containment chamber, as she reacted negatively to the idea of having turtles as food. Sadly, this was one of the denied requests. SCP-811 was also involved in a few cross-tests with other anomalies, leading to curious results. After realizing just how dangerous SCP-811 secretions could be, Foundation researchers naturally floated the idea of using it on SCP-682 in its seemingly endless termination experiments. A sample of 682's flesh was successfully decayed by the dangerous mucus, so a larger quantity collected over a number of months was then sprayed all over the beast. It managed to reduce 682's body mass by 27%, melting its way through the covered flesh down to the bone. However, at that point, it was unable to decay further, and SCP-682 soon returned back to its normal state. Who could have possibly seen that coming, right? However, a much more interesting and enlightening cross-test occurred with SCP-978, the Desire Camera. If you haven't already seen our video on the Desire Camera, it's pretty much exactly what the name suggests. A Polaroid camera that reveals the deepest desire of its subject.
and the Foundation decided to test it on a large number of staff and anomalies, one of those being SCP-811. When a photograph was taken of SCP-811 just staring at the camera, the resulting photo depicted a human woman with the same height, build, and facial features as SCP-811, braiding yellow ribbons into her hair and wearing a blue sundress. The attending researchers felt this raised an interesting question. Were they looking at an aspiration towards humanity from SCP-811, or was this a yearning to return to what had been before? There was only one way to find out. Conduct an interview with the creature itself. When the interview began, the researchers pressed 811 on some of her earliest memories. One of the key details she shared was regarding a mysterious man whom she claimed came to her before she looked like she did now, back when her skin was soft and pink. The bad man. He injected something into her arm, and whatever it was, it changed her, mutated her, took away her precious humanity. The first thing she remembered feeling after that was an all-consuming hunger, and then melting and devouring the one who changed her, destroying any possible answers as to who he was or why he did it in the process. It was a story of victimization and dehumanization so cruel and upsetting that researcher Watchtel, an assistant researcher attending the interview, actually threw up. Later debriefing interviews revealed it was because he had a daughter of roughly the same age, with long dark hair. If SCP-811 has any parents herself, we may never know. Such is the strange tragedy of SCP-811. Whether you wish to call her by her number, a nickname like the Swamp Woman, or her self-given name of Ai, we'll likely never know who she was before, as not even she knows now. It is an unsettling reminder that all of our grasps on humanity are looser than you think. Sometimes all it takes is one chance encounter to change who you are completely. Norse mythology tells the story of Jörmungandr, a great serpent so long that it wraps itself the entire way around Midgard and bites its own tail. Legend says that when Jörmungandr unclasps its jaws and starts to unfurl, it will signal the beginning of Ragnarok, the destruction of the world. And that was about as much information as the Foundation gave to Agent Nielsen when they assigned him to his watch duty in Greenland. In the frozen tundra all day, every day, he had been equipped with a sniper rifle, thermal goggles, and put up high in a watchtower. If he saw anyone, he had to shoot on sight, no questions asked. Whether it was his squad mates, the Brigadier General, or even his own mother, if anyone walked across the barren stretch of ice ahead of him, he was to shoot them dead. Under no circumstances was anyone allowed to enter that cave. The fate of the world could depend on it. But it was cold, and the days were long. For months he'd been sitting there by himself without seeing a single soul walk across the glacier. That's why it took him so long to spy the figure stumbling across the ice half a kilometer away. But the person didn't look any clearer when Agent Nielsen took a look through his thermal binoculars. Barely registering as much warmer than the snow around him, the man stumbled forward, seemingly unaware of the world around him. Could this be the start of the swan song of the world? Is this what he had been warned about? Without a moment's hesitation, Agent Nielsen snatched up the sniper rifle and readied his sights on the man. Somewhere buried deep beneath the Greenland ice is one of the most dangerous SCPs that the Foundation has ever come across. To say that SCP-722's reawakening could spell the destruction of human civilization is no idle concern. Classified as a Keter-level SCP, SCP-722 has been nicknamed Jörmungandr, after the Norse myth. Researchers speculate that the creature's existence could in some way be linked to the early origins of the story of the Norse creature. 722 was brought to the Foundation's attention relatively recently. Environmental activist group Greenpeace was shooting a documentary on the effects of global warming on glaciers in Greenland. A small crew, including a director, producer, 3 camera operators, and a sound recordist, headed out to get some close-up footage from amongst the glaciers. Walking from ice sheet to ice sheet,
they noticed several rounded entrances to what looked like deep ice caves. Surmising that these openings were only accessible to them because of the melting glacier ice, the crew climbed down into the caves to get some never-before-seen footage. Some of the footage of their exploration has been recovered since, and in the background of several shots as they are adjusting exposure and pulling focus, you can hear the producer and director theorizing about where these caves have come from. They initially seem to think that the caves are millennia old, preserved by sub-zero temperatures, but soon they come across several markings on the walls, ancient hieroglyphs and symbols. None of the crew were language experts, and so in the footage you can hear them struggling to identify which people group would have carved those into the ice walls. In the decades since, language experts from around the world have studied these markings on those walls, and have still been unable to identify any discernible links to any known human script. Most agree that it does seem to predate the settlement of the island by Eric the Red at the start of the 11th century. During this period, it is believed that there were no human settlements on the island, so the origins of this script remain unknown. As the footage goes on, you may start to notice something that the Greenpeace crew does not. One of the ice walls is no longer a wall at all. It looks like a rock in some of the footage, but whenever a flashlight shines on its surface, you can see a pattern to it. Scales. Then an opening at the far side of the tunnel. The crew emerges into an enormous cavern, estimated to be upwards of 200 meters in height and several times wider. Even their powerful flashlights struggle to cut through the darkness inside. That's the point that the sound recordist notices the scales running alongside them. As the camera pans, you see that they have been walking alongside a tail, several times taller than them. A tail that snakes its way through the darkness of the cavern to meet a hulking mass at the other side, shrouded in darkness. That is where the footage cuts off. Those Greenpeace filmmakers were next seen in a local town that evening. None of them had the chance to extol the wonders of what they'd encountered that day, as they were all sick. A couple went straight to bed in their lodgings complaining of intense headaches and exhaustion. Others tried to check themselves into the ER, but never made it. Each of the crew died of different causes: necrosis of the skin, internal bleeding, kidney failure. By 9 p.m. that day, all of them were dead. Fortunately, there just so happened to be a low-level Foundation agent staying in the same guest house as them who heard the commotion. Within 2 days, a perimeter was established. Within 2 years, the Foundation gained the bulk of knowledge of this SCP that they rely on to this day. It is unknown exactly how large SCP-722 actually is. A hulking serpent, half buried in ice, much of its body cannot be observed. It sleeps coiled up in the middle of the cavern that the filmmakers happened across. Some of its body is buried beneath fallen-in parts of the caves, others frozen into the ground around it. However, based on what can be observed of this SCP, it is estimated to be in the ranges of 8 to 12 kilometers from head to tail. Fortunately for just about everyone, including you, this SCP appears to be dormant. At no time since its discovery has this SCP been observed to move, make a sound, or otherwise indicate consciousness. Sensors are installed in the chamber to monitor its life functions and study its heart rate, temperature, brain activity, and more. One concern to the Foundation is that since its discovery, 722 has had a 0.9% uptick in neural activity. Researchers hope that this is just a natural part of the sleep cycle and that it will return to a deeper slumber soon. That is the hope, at least. So what makes this SCP so dangerous then if it's sound asleep? Well, let's go back to Agent Nielsen staring through the scope of his rifle. The barrel kicked back, a puff of warm smoke there and gone in cold air. He watched just long enough to confirm the kill before radioing back to command what he had observed. Within an hour, the cleanup crew arrived. Riding on snowmobiles, they waited at a distance for an hour before approaching the body. Rather unceremoniously, they wrapped it up in a black plastic bag, strapped it to the back of their snowmobile, and took it away for cremation. Nielsen just sat there in his watchtower the whole time, observing it all. The person looked sick, and not the kind of sick that you'd get from spending too much time out there on the ice. Their skin had gone rotten, like they had gangrene or leprosy. It wasn't just your usual frostbite. Most concerning, they'd been wearing a jumpsuit, standard issue for D-Class personnel. Only a vial held in their cold, dead fingers was any kind of clue for Nielsen as to what had been going on in that cave. but that was as close as the agent ever came to understanding the mysteries of SCP-722. The vial, however, was in many ways all he needed to know. That is because contained in that vial was a sample of the liquid secreted by 722. It is a liquid that the Greenpeace crew came into close contact with when they found the creature, and it's a liquid that promises and denies great power and great risk to the Foundation. Any and all attempts to study this liquid in any meaningful sense have failed. Anyone who comes into contact with it will immediately suffer acute sickness. Interestingly, however, there seems to be little consistency as to how this sickness manifests itself. Some develop a number of cancerous cells, whilst others lose cognitive function due to brain swelling. Symptoms seem to vary from person to person. Naturally, this makes studying the substance very difficult. Hazardous material suits have been deployed for researchers attempting to study it, but have all failed, despite being otherwise effective against chemical, biological, and radioactive threats. How the substance is able to infect them is unknown. Sadly, a good number of scientists had to die to make this discovery. Another route of study is to take the substance out of the cave and observe it under laboratory conditions. This was what Agent Nielsen observed as he shot and killed the D-Class personnel emerging from the cave. The D-Class had been sent in to retrieve the vial of the substance for external study. While a safe and direct route of entry and exit had been planned for the man to take, he became critically ill whilst in contact with 722 and developed an aggressive fever. No longer coherent over the radio, he dropped out of signal, wandering through the tunnels for 2 hours until emerging out of an exit high up on the glacier. 2 agents with higher security clearance were dispatched to deal with the body. The reason for their wait was for their own safety. 722's toxin appears to denature with time away from its source, causing it to weaken in potency. If they had approached immediately, they may have well suffered similar fates to the D-Class. They survived, but the sample was ruined. All subsequent attempts have also been met with failure. It seems almost impossible to capture a clean sample and transport it any kind of distance. With this toxin, the Foundation would have possession of an immense biological weapon, akin to the discovery of the atom bomb. But as of right now, all it's good for is killing D-Class personnel. Initially, the Foundation believed the fluid to be a defense mechanism for the SCP, something to protect it in its deep sleep. But the more time is spent observing it, the more time this perception is shifting. SCP-722's toxin appears instead to be a weapon. As such, the containment of this creature is of paramount importance. There are 8 known access points into the tunnel network that would grant access to SCP-722. Each of them has been sealed with reinforced gates with additional layers of soundproofing. At regular 4-hour intervals, nitrogen gas cooled to a near-liquid state is to be pumped through these doors without fail. It is believed that the creature is a form of proto-reptile, and so is theoretically cold-blooded. Its internal temperature is dictated by its surroundings. Therefore, by keeping a cool average temperature in these caves, it is thought that this SCP's slumber can be prolonged. How long is unclear. With rising global temperatures year after year, the threat that the Greenpeace activists were proclaiming is very real, just perhaps not quite in the way they'd envisioned. Not only would there be an increase in natural disasters and a decrease in biodiversity, there would also be a 12-kilometer snake roaming around the planet, killing anyone in its path. Not ideal. As such, the Foundation has also planted a number of highly skilled individuals in prominent environmental positions in the hopes of turning the tide of global warming sooner. Should the ice in that cave system warm by even a couple of degrees, who knows what kind of spike they might see on the neural monitors. This SCP naturally is buried deep beneath layers and layers of security clearances too. Only in exceptional circumstances and for vital maintenance is anyone allowed to approach this SCP. A minimum of 2 Level 3 clearance agents are required to sign off on any such works. In recent years, a new Brigadier General took charge of the containment operations of SCP-722 after his predecessor was stripped of his duties. Overly zealous experiments and increasingly desperate attempts to harvest or synthesize the 722 toxin saw an alarming uptick in neural activity. Over 40 D-Class personnel were processed and disposed of within a 2-week period in an attempt to assemble a micro-laboratory within the main chamber itself. This project failed, and the noises of construction threatened the peace that had so long been maintained beneath the glacier. The new Brigadier General is taking no such risks, enforcing a zero-tolerance policy on anyone approaching Site 103 unless suitably cleared. A number of hikers have sadly had to be killed this way, but the Foundation believes it to be a necessary sacrifice to keep the peace. It is quite easy to find a convincing backstory for their untimely deaths and the lack of bodies to bury. Just another person to get lost and fall down a crack in the glacier, warning stories that are shared and planted in local towns and on the internet. The only threat to this current peace is a new avenue of inquiry that researchers have stumbled across, a link to a group of animals found halfway around the world. Monitor lizards of the genus Varanus seem to share a similar set of traits to SCP-722, namely the nature of their toxins. You may be familiar with the bite of a Komodo dragon. While the initial wound sure does hurt, the real damage comes in the following hours and days as necrosis sets in from the toxins in its mouth. Could these creatures share a common ancestor? Could 722 be the common ancestor? As of right now, it is just a hunch, but it's one that has taken root amongst the research staff. In order to find out more, though, they need samples, tissue samples, taken straight from the SCP itself. The only way to do back is to go back into the caves and start cutting. If a bit of construction noise was enough to raise brain activity by 0.9%, taking a hunk of flesh could prove a whole lot more dangerous, not least for the personnel involved, who will all have to sacrifice their lives. The potential benefits could be huge. A way to study fatal diseases in a new light, perhaps finding a way to reverse engineer cures to some of the deadliest conditions on the planet, or perhaps the missing ingredient to synthesizing the most powerful biological weapon in human history. Maybe worst of all, it could all trigger the reawakening. Do you remember how the story of Jörmungandr ends? With a prediction that when the great serpent uncoils, the end of the world, Ragnarok itself, will arrive. But that's just an old fairy tale, right? 2 a.m., a few miles outside the city. The car tore down the asphalt at 60 miles an hour. We kept the beams low, the dark road around us only illuminated by the occasional street lamp overhead. Things moved unseen in the trees. An old song rattled off the radio. The connection was patchy, so it was interrupted by intermittent spikes of static. It was the kind of night when you knew deep down that anything could happen. You just hoped that anything would be in your favor. I rolled the window down a few minutes ago, breathing in all that cold, fresh air to stave off the looming specter of sleep. Thank God I wasn't the one driving, or things would have gotten deadly way sooner. Cops would have found us with our bumper wrapped around a tree, our heads one with the steering wheel or the windshield dead on impact, or from the unforgiving cold overnight. They might have even felt sorry for us until they found the case. Perhaps it would have been better that way. At least it would have been quick. A lot of bad things can happen on lonely state highways in the dead of night, and we were about to find out that just crashing your car was one of the more mild ones. Scott was driving. He was also the one who brokered this whole deal. I was just coming along to provide backup. There was a fully loaded Saturday night special sitting in my inner coat pocket, hoping that it wouldn't see any action tonight, and a pump-action shotgun sitting in the back in case things got really hairy. Deals like this, you either come well prepared or reckon with a heavy chance you sure as hell won't be leaving. I never asked Scott how he came into the goods currently sitting in the briefcase, and he never offered an explanation either. He only told me that he'd already secured a very interested potential buyer from a syndicate out of town. Serious people, dangerous people. They'd pay top dollar or leave us tied up in trash bags in a ditch off the side of the highway. But we both needed money, and we were willing to take that risk if it meant we could return from this deal as a pair of rich men. The terms of the deal were simple. We drive out onto a certain state highway at a little after 2 a.m. with the goods, meet the buyers at a certain rest stop along the way, and make the exchange. We'd then all go our separate ways, and if we were lucky, none of us would ever see each other ever again. Seemed simple enough, sure. Scott seemed downright chipper about the whole thing, and for a little while, I was excited too, until he told me about the road that the buyers wanted to meet us on. We'd all heard legends about the place. Superstitions, really. People think criminals are scary, but believe me, we're a surprisingly superstitious bunch. Our profession is one largely based on luck, being in the right place at the right time, and being lucky enough to avoid the cops along the way. But something you need to know, whether you're a criminal or arrows straight, is that some places are always going to be the wrong place.
I'm not going to tell you which road it is. I know what you knuckleheads are like. You're curious. You're thrill seekers. Hey, we were all young once. But if I tell you what this road is, I know you're going to try to find it. Maybe you'll even decide it's worth the trip down for a pleasant Sunday drive. After what I went through on that road, I wouldn't wish a trip down it on my worst enemy. There's no other word for what we encountered there other than evil. When we were kids, we used to call it the Devil's Passage. Every spooky rumor and scary story in the book circulated about that place. Let me see what I can remember. Well, there was the Watcher in the Woods. People used to say that there was a long, tall figure with the biggest eyes you had ever seen, eyes like headlights, standing amongst the trees. If the moonlight shone in the right angle as you were driving past, you'd see it standing there, just staring at you, thinking about doing who knows what. Then there was Old Beth, the ghostly hitchhiker. People used to say they saw a strange old woman hobbling down the side of the road in the middle of the night. Sometimes people said that they could hear her crying, even if they were far enough away to make such a thing seem impossible. If you took pity on her and pulled over, asking her if she needed a ride, she'd tell you that you were a very kind person, but that she was fine and dandy walking along by herself. But if you didn't stop and offer her a lift, if you just drove away, well, local legend had it that the next time you'd see her face would be in your rearview mirror as she sat in your back seat, reaching for you with her ancient bony claws. It'd make you think twice about leaving an old woman to walk home alone in the dark. And of course, there was the lone jogger. The stories my dad told me about him always used to scare the hell out of me. He was a pale man, dressed unnaturally light for the cold winter months, jogging along the side of the road. If you looked at him, he'd look back. If your eyes ever met, the stories went that he'd start running after you. It wouldn't matter how fast you drove, he'd somehow always catch up and stare at you through the glass of your car's windows. He never hurt anyone directly, but I imagine he probably caused a heart attack or two in his time, if he ever really existed. But all of these things were nothing, I repeat, nothing, compared to the Phantom Cruiser. You have to drive cautiously at night, because if you didn't, you might find a ghostly 1970s police cruiser tailgating you, and that'd be the worst thing you ever saw. There were fewer stories about this one than all the others, because if you ever ran afoul of the Phantom Cruiser, chances are that you wouldn't survive to tell people about what happened to you. Though people could still make an educated guess about what happened to you based on whatever was left behind. Here's a not-so-fun fact. The Devil's Passage is technically qualified for one of the most dangerous highways in the country, from crashes to hitchhiker murders to unexplained deaths on the side of the road. Since 1974, this road has been an incredibly unpleasant place to drive. Every time I saw another horror story about a strange death on the road, I'd think of the Phantom Cruiser, and it was those same thoughts polluting my brain that night. As Scott drove the two of us to the rest stop halfway down the Devil's Passage, I only realized I'd dozed off when he nudged me awake, and the blurry lights of distant street lamps flashed into my field of vision. "Look alive," he said. "We're here." The rest stop wasn't much to look at. All that there was an abandoned gas station, really the perfect place for this kind of illicit deal. My hand moved instinctively to the special in my coat and clicked back the hammer. Something about this whole setup wasn't right. Sting operation, police ambush, this whole thing reeked of a deal too good to be true. My instincts turned out to be right, in a sense, just not the way I was expecting. As we turned into the rest stop, Scott turned up his beams. All we saw was carnage waiting for us. A car, presumably one that once belonged to our prospective buyers, in a state of horrific disarray. It looked as though a train had impacted the side of the vehicle, completely caving it in. The metal was covered in deep scratches and ruts that almost looked like claw marks. It had been eviscerated. Scott broke, hard, and we both got out of the car. I drew the special out of my jacket, and he grabbed the shotgun out of the back seat. We approached with caution, worrying this might just be another part of the setup, until we saw the thick puddle of blood congealing under the driver's side door. We drew closer, propelled by morbid curiosity. Was it a hit from a rival gang looking to intercept the deal? Seemed logical, but there were no bullet holes in the car. Just ripping, tearing, and massive impact damage. Scott shined the light of his phone into the destroyed car, and I vomited when I saw what was inside. The buyers looked less like people and more like 2 sacks of pulled pork in tattered clothes. If I hadn't seen them inside the car, I wouldn't have even guessed they were human, and the damage wasn't just to them. The upholstery was torn up and burned. with violent symbols carved into the walls and scrawled onto the cracked windows in blood. When I turned to Scott, he was ghost white, clutching his phone and shotgun with trembling hands. We didn't exchange a word, but we both knew it was time to leave. We could find another buyer. There'd be other opportunities, other deals. But lives? You only get one. And we both silently acknowledged that if we stuck around here much longer, we wouldn't even have that. We sped back into the car and locked the doors behind us, for whatever good that would do, considering the damage that had been done to the buyers and their car. Perhaps we just needed the illusion of security to get us the hell out of there. The car pulled out of the rest stop at breakneck speed. Scott floored it, trying to put some good distance between us and the horror at that rest stop. Whatever had happened to the buyers, we didn't fancy sharing that same awful fate. My heart dropped down to my guts when I heard the sirens and flashing lights behind us. After all this, we'd been busted for speeding. They'd pull us over and find the guns and the briefcase in the car, and they'd have a lot of questions that neither of us would have good answers to. We didn't know whether to slow down and hope for the best or speed up and take this boy in blue on a genuine car chase. This whole thing couldn't have gone more wrong. But my thoughts soon drifted from getting used to the taste of prison food to something altogether more sinister. When I saw the car getting closer in the rearview mirror, I realized that this wasn't a modern cop car tailing us. It was a beat-up old 70s cruiser, traveling at insane speeds, gaining on us. The high beams cut through me like razor blades. I heard the radio crackle into life, even though neither I nor Scott touched it. It wasn't music, just a hoarse, scratchy voice repeating the word, "Run," again and again. And seeing as whatever was behind us clearly wasn't a real cop, we were more than happy to oblige that request. Scott hit the gas like our lives depended on it, which, to be fair, they did. But no matter how fast we sped up, the cruiser kept getting closer, like a demon on our tail. I screamed at Scott to go faster, but we were going as fast as we could. Next thing I knew, the Phantom Cruiser collided with the backside of our car and sent us into a spin, showering the two of us with broken glass crystals as the tires screeched across the asphalt. It felt like an eternity before the car came to a rest, and at that moment, the Phantom Cruiser stopped too. Someone got out. He was dressed like a cop. He even looked like a cop. A dude in his 40s, balding, overweight, with a handlebar mustache. But something was wrong about him. He didn't say a word as he approached the car, and he didn't seem to register me sliding the special out of my jacket either. He was inches away from Scott's window when I panicked and opened fire, sending a hail of small caliber rounds into his gut. He stumbled back slightly, as though shocked, and then everything got a whole lot worse. The cop let out the most awful bellow, not of pain, but of pure rage. Something happened to his face. His eyes started to glow a bright, hellish red, and his jaw began to extend until he looked like a Munch painting. There were no teeth in there, just an infinite black void. He grabbed a dazed Scott through the window, pulling him into a brutal headlock and dragging him out of the car, releasing those deranged bellows the entire time. Scott screamed and pleaded for help. I grabbed his body and tried to pull him back, but the cop was inhumanly strong. He just kept pulling until he was all the way out, thrashing on the asphalt. I don't want to tell you what he did next. Wouldn't be right. But suffice to say, I couldn't save Scott, and I definitely didn't want it happening to me. While he was working on Scott, I scrambled into the driver's seat and floored it, hoping that Scott would at least buy me some time. I was weeping in terror as I drove away into the dark, leaving my friend to a horrible fate with the driver of the Phantom Cruiser. So you can only imagine how I felt when a few minutes later, I heard the sirens again and saw the bright lights getting closer behind me. Run! Run! Run!
Diego had only just found his footing when it gave out underneath him again. Crashing to the ground, he threw both arms over his head just in time to protect his skull from the rain of boulders that came down past him. They grazed his arms and jarred painfully against his muscles, but it was better than having them hit him in the head. Without a moment to spare, Diego got straight up to his feet and continued running back down the trail he had been trying to follow. The ground shifted and lurched in all directions under him, threatening to throw off his balance at any moment. Having lived in Chile his whole life, he had gotten used to earthquakes, but he had never been in the center of one like this. The problem was that the trail he had been following to get up here was disappearing fast as the dust swirled into the air and boulders landing all around him. He just had to keep running in this direction and hope for the best. There weren't any other options. But suddenly, he found himself running uphill. Stumbling forwards, Diego tried desperately to get his bearings. He had spent the previous 3 hours hiking up the mountains, so how was it that now that he had turned around and gone back, he was still going uphill? It was almost as if the ground was changing shape beneath him as he ran. Dust filled his lungs as he tried to wipe it away from his burning eyes. Yes, the ground was definitely going uphill, but it felt almost as if it was lifting itself up beneath him, as if some tectonic plates were grinding together, creating a new mountain beneath his feet. Diego lurched unsteadily and grabbed the nearest rock to keep his balance, feeling the ground lifting higher and higher beneath him. Then, all of a sudden, the cloud of dust broke, and he was in fresh air rising ever higher into the sky. The Andes Mountains stabbed out of the clouds all around him, cutting beautiful shapes across the horizon. He felt his own mountain steadily growing taller than any of them. He dropped down on all floors and clutched at the ground in terror as he tried his best to take in the shape of what he was now standing upon. How far would you go to prevent a cosmic-level disaster? It's one thing to save your friends and family from an armed murderer. It's another thing to fight for your country in a world war. We can even just about imagine what it means to fight for our planet, to save our species from climate change, to save our world from a meteorite. But what would a cosmic disaster look like? A calamity so broad in scale that it surpasses our ability to even perceive the threat. We could point our most advanced telescope into deep space and look straight down the middle of it and never know it was even there. And if that threat was not simply to the survival of humanity or planet Earth, but to the survival of existence itself, how far would we go to prevent it? What cruel and inhumane measures would you take to have such a threat? Or better yet, how many people would you kill to save the world? This debate is raging right now as you sit here and watch this video. Not among the Foundation, but between two SCPs so grand in scale and so advanced in nature that the Foundation has no option but to sit and listen as the pair debate what to do with the human race. SCP-4568-1 was not difficult to discover once it started moving. In fact, it was almost impossible to ignore. Earthquakes have been tearing across South America for centuries, destroying homes, taking the lives of innocent people, and fundamentally changing the shape of our planet itself. What most people do not realize, however, is that the fault line running through the Andes mountain range has actually largely been dormant during this period. The source of the earthquakes has come from something far more mysterious. Our innocent hiker, Diego, had been spending the week walking among the Andes when the earthquake struck. You would be forgiven for assuming, as Diego did, that the ground rising beneath his feet was a new mountain forming as the tectonic plates clashed together. But the staggering reality of the situation was that he found himself hiking along the back of SCP-4568-1. As the creature raised its head into the air, Diego saw the head of a serpent lifting several kilometers away from him. Its body stretched and wound its way through the mountain range, filling the valleys and running beneath his feet. The scale of SCP-4568-1 is hard to convey. Measuring over 500 kilometers in length, this serpent is longer than most US states, with a 20-kilometer width. Standing on the back of it quite literally feels like standing on a mountain range. For context, the horizon at sea level is about 4.8 kilometers away, so multiply that by 4 and you'll get a sense of just how wide this thing is. Even small movements from this SCP are enough to trigger continent-wide earthquakes, with tremors being felt all the way around the world. Upon the initial discovery of this SCP, the Foundation was unable to determine why it remains dormant for such long periods and seems to only awaken sporadically and for brief periods of time. That was, until SCP-4568-2 was discovered. It is little wonder that the second serpent took so long to be found. Its body is comprised almost entirely of water, sand, algae, and steam. It does not show up on sonar scans and is incredibly difficult to detect in the water, even visually. Its form is loosely defined whilst dormant, with broadly similar measurements to SCP-4568-1. This serpent roams the South Pacific Ocean. Any marine creatures that swim into the SCP's body find themselves undergoing beneficial mutations. Crabs grow extra pinchers, bottom feeders grow larger mouths, and sharks find themselves developing heightened senses and even extra hearts. These marine animals seem to undergo virtually no distress and are free to exit and re-enter the SCP's body at any point. Initially, SCP-4568-2 was believed to be the peaceful one of the pair. Both serpents seemed to become active at the same time. While on land, SCP-4568-1 would wreak havoc with magnitude 7 earthquakes in major metropolitan areas. The sea serpent's function was less well understood. Employing resonant frequencies and vibrations, this SCP was able to give its watery body a distinct form as it rose up from the ocean and towered above the waves. In order to maintain its shape and control its movements, this SCP employed a huge amount of energy. However, the Foundation quickly observed that it was rarely able to maintain its form for very long. As soon as the sea serpent rose out of the water, its mountainous twin would begin to move, sending tremors around the world that disrupted the frequency needed for SCP-4568-2 to remain animate. Exhausted and unable to maintain its shape, the sea serpent would fall into another period of dormancy, gliding lazily through the oceans. But this dormancy suited the Foundation. Without the constant seismic tremors, researchers could work fast. 2 operating bases were set up to monitor each SCP. 2 mirrored bases with mirrored teams in constant communication with one another. As soon as one team made a discovery, it was conveyed to the others and vice versa. One operating base was set up high in the Andes Mountains, specifically designed to be as earthquake-proof as possible, capable of withstanding earthquakes up to 9.9 magnitude. Meanwhile, in the South Pacific Ocean, an underwater research center was built just above the seabed, with regular vessels drifting out into the unknown to gather whatever data they could about the great SCPs. Several early findings stood out. Firstly, SCP-4568-1 appeared to have a very different internal structure from its twin. Researchers initially assumed that the creature would be largely composed of earth minerals and rock, as its exterior appearance suggested. However, scans of its body indicated the presence of what can only be assumed to be artificially created components. Great gears resembling clockwork structures and even rudimentary circuitry were present throughout the creature's body. The function or origin of these gears has yet to be determined, especially as there is no evident way that their movement corresponds to the autonomy and movement of the serpent itself. The far more striking discovery, however, came when the SCP Foundation discovered a way to communicate with the 2 beasts. Ultra-low frequency waves capable of traveling vast distances, even light years, were discovered to be emitted from the 2 serpents' heads at intermittent periods. The Foundation had to develop some of the largest antennae ever created to pick up these frequencies and interpret the data coming through them. What they found were 2 twins locked in a fierce debate about the fate of humanity and the universe itself. It was only then that the motivations of these 2 serpents started to make sense. In 2010, almost as soon as the Foundation was able to tap into the frequency, they were contacted directly by SCP-4568-1. Foundation, I know that you can hear me. I will not apologize for my actions. I know that I am the reason that millions of your kind face their demise. I know your pain, and I feel it too, but I shall never apologize for it. I simply ask you to listen to myself and to my word cannot be translated. You are curious, you can be patient. Exercise that, and you may one day understand. And listen, the Foundation did. Efforts to contain or destroy the 2 serpents were put on the back burner. Instead, Foundation agents prioritized spreading disinformation across South America and beyond about the source of these earthquakes. The 2 serpents are far too large and far too powerful to overcome or contain. Instead, the Foundation prioritized the use of amnestic drugs, disinformation, and the creation of fringe conspiracy groups to discredit any claims of the serpents' respective existences. Meanwhile, some of the most senior leadership figures in the Foundation were and still are locked in a fierce debate as to what to do with the twin Serpents. By listening to the communication between the two SCPs, the Foundation discovered that SCP-4568-2 is intent on wiping out the entire human race. The only thing that has prevented it from being able to do so thus far has been the existence of the other Serpent. Every time that SCP-4568-2 begins to mount an attack on humanity, its land-bearing twin triggers enormous earthquakes to disrupt its progress. But why would the Sea Serpent want to destroy the human race? As Foundation generals gathered in the Deep Sea Operations Base, SCP-4568-2 came to the observation window to look them in the eyes as it told them,
"I am sure you can see it. How your world dies a little bit more every day. Mostly by your own hand, no? You poison the oceans, taint the rivers, blacken the skies. You do not need angels of death to destroy your world. But there is something else. I see it in the bottom of your eyes. Something unforgettable, unconceivable ideas cloaked in madness and impossible colors. Do you think I will let you drag the rest of the world down with yourselves? Do you think I will leave this world, my world, to die in flames? It sees your world, and it comes in fives."
Since this revelation, the Foundation has poured countless hours and resources into trying to identify a cosmic threat. For well over a decade, many of the smartest scientists the world has to offer have looked to the night sky, scanning for this impossible color, this shroud of madness, but to no avail. Some within the Foundation believe the Serpent is lying, trying to make up an excuse to justify its genocide, but information from SCP-4568-1 seems to confirm everyone's worst fears.
Your minds burn bright, Foundation. All of humanity shines from this rock, like a candle in a dark room. It sees you. An idea exists only because something thought of it. Have you ever considered how such terrible concepts could have been given form? What kind of atrocious mind could even think about it? Humans cannot conceive the colorless green. What if you are playing into this creature's hands?
There appears to be an underlying implication that ideas are the source of power somehow. This colorless green, this unimaginable cosmic threat, seems to be a monstrous idea incarnate. But whose idea? Humanity's? There is a deep lore that the two Serpents discuss with one another, one that makes little sense even to this day to the Foundation. They talk of gods and goddesses, deities of flesh, of steel and gears, and of the fives. Quite what these creatures are, if they are even creatures at all, is a mystery to the Foundation. Researchers have not discovered a way of communicating back with the two Serpents directly. Attempts to mimic their language or transmit signals asking questions to them have largely been ignored. Instead, they address humanity and the Foundation as a whole, seeming to take the view of the human race as being a collective hive mind, one that they are evidently able to tap into. The pair seem uninterested in informing us as to exactly what this threat is, or explaining who the gods and goddesses are. Perhaps they assume we know these things already, or more likely, they believe that our consciousness is not yet capable of perceiving the scale and depth of the concepts that they are debating. What is clear, however, is their shared understanding that if humanity were to be eliminated, the candle was to be blown out, this cosmic threat would pass by. The pair have names. Trenten is the land serpent, while remaining dormant much of the time in an enormous cave system beneath the Andes Mountains. This serpent seems keen to help the Foundation in some way. Kai, the sea serpent, is intent on sacrificing the human race for a greater good, one far beyond our understanding. Speaking to the Foundation in the Andes Mountains, Trenten gave a short speech that served both as encouragement and a terrible warning of the darkness to come.
It is something I like about you, Foundation, about mankind. While it is easy to just take the simplest path, to just give up, there will always be some among you who refuse this path, who do the right thing. Maybe not all of you are this strong, but I can see it in your methods. Those so-called containment procedures. There will always be someone who stands up against the dark, even if it takes 1,000 million years to emerge victorious. Maybe you can stop the thief. After all, ideas can be killed with better ideas, even if it takes 1,000 million.
Growing up in a small Virginia town near the mountains right on the border of West Virginia, Zane heard all kinds of stories from his grandmother. Tales of mountain lions who could transform into ghostly women, the Talipo, a fluffy rodent-like creature on an endless quest to get its tail back from the hunter who took it, the Mothman that appeared with glowing red eyes to warn of impending tragedy. Most of all, she warned him about the deer. "Sometimes," she used to say, "when you're out in the woods late at night, you'll see a deer acting a little bit funny. Maybe it's making strange sounds. Maybe it's standing up like a man. Maybe it's staring at you from the shadows and won't look away. If you ever see one of these deer, promise me you'll get away from it as fast as possible. Don't look at it, don't talk to it, just get far, far away." He promised her every time, but as he got older, he started to forget his grandma's stories, letting them fade away with memories of the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus. He didn't think about the stories again until he was older, a junior in college and embarking on a camping trip with his roommate Josh. They were both staying with Zane's family for the summer and had been enjoying the sunshine and fresh air. They'd gone hiking, picked blackberries, and gone fishing to their heart's content. After a while, they got sick of sleeping in the cramped house and decided to have a proper camping trip out in the mountains. Campsites were crowded this time of year, but Zane knew a spot just isolated enough that they could kick back, enjoy nature, and relax in peace. They packed their supplies and headed out into the forest for a weekend they would never forget. By nightfall, Zane and Josh had pitched their tents, built a fire, and were starting to make some dinner. They roasted hot dogs and heated cans of beans over the fire and decided to start telling some classic scary stories. Sitting by the crackling fire, listening to the rustling leaves, snapping twigs, and the chittering of animals all around, Zane couldn't help but remember the stories he had almost forgotten. All of the strange, inexplicable things that came out after the sun went down and the forest went quiet. He thought he could hear the footsteps of something walking by their campsite, circling them, but it was probably just his imagination. As Josh told stories about babysitters stalked by killers and drivers picking up ghostly hitchhikers, Zane was thinking about the deer. He shuddered but shook it off, and after some more stories and a few too many s'mores, the two friends decided to get some sleep. After several hours, Zane woke to the sound of Josh unzipping his tent. He sat up, ready to yell at his friend for waking him up, but the sight of Josh's pale, frightened face stopped him. "There's something here," was all Josh could say. His hands, Zane noticed, were shaking. "Hey man, it's okay, let's check it out." Zane patted Josh on the shoulder. He was pretty sure his friend just wasn't used to camping in actual nature, but reached for his hunting knife just in case. He grabbed a flashlight and switched it on, following Josh out into the darkness. He swept the beam across the clearing, and it illuminated a pair of orange eyes staring directly at him from behind a nearby tree. "What the?" He approached the shape, trying to get a clear look at it. As it became more illuminated, his stomach dropped. It was a deer, but something was wrong with it. Its mouth was wide open, its jaw working up and down like it was trying to make a sound, but nothing came out. But that wasn't the worst part. As the flashlight beam illuminated the animal's body, Zane realized that somehow its head was on backwards. "What the?" Josh appeared behind him, gasping. "Shh!" Zane shushed him intensely. He suddenly remembered his grandmother's warnings. "You know what? I don't feel so great. I think we should go back to the car and head to my place." He gave Josh a look, shaking his head as if to say, "Don't say another word." By the glow of their flashlights, the two packed up their campsite, all under the gaze of the misshapen deer. They drove home in silence, Josh only speaking once to ask, "What was that thing?" Zane shook his head. "I don't know, but it wasn't a deer." They crept back into the house and went to bed.
They knew they would never speak of tonight ever again. As Zane began to drift off to sleep, his last conscious thought was to glance out the window. There in the yard, not 5 feet away, was a deer, watching. He didn't know it, but that night Zane encountered an instance of SCP-6448. SCP-6448 is an anomalous species of creatures that appear to belong to the Cervidae family, nicknamed the Not Deer. They are highly intelligent and can be distinguished from ordinary deer by unusual behavior and physical deformities. Some of these have included legs that bend backwards, the eyes of an animal other than deer, forward-facing eyes, jerky movements, lack of fear towards humans, and walking on 2 hind legs. Most notably and most frightening, SCP-6448 instances will watch and stalk humans for a duration of hours or even days. They will follow humans home and steal items from their domains, including weapons, food, and other personal items. They're most frequently found in the deep woods at night when a person is completely alone. If someone encounters an instance of SCP-6448, if they acknowledge any of the creature's anomalous traits, it will attack. In order to limit the loss of life and ensure that the SCP Foundation employees exercise the utmost caution when dealing with SCP-6448, the Cryptozoology Division issued the following guidelines. If you notice a deer that seems off, look away and ignore it. If it knows that you've noticed it, it's too late. If you hear your name, whistling, or something else in the woods calling for you, don't acknowledge it. Never acknowledge it exists. Don't respond. Don't go looking for it. Don't call back to it. If you're walking at night and you feel something breathing on your neck or whispering behind you, the key to your safety is pretending that everything is normal. Your survival is dependent on your ignorance. Whatever SCP-6448 is, they appear to be intelligent enough to understand when they are being studied, and they don't seem to like it very much. On January 11, 1994, a group of 3 SCP-6448 instances broke into Site 41 in North Carolina, using a tunnel they had carved over a long period of time. At the time, there was an instance in containment, but in all of the chaos of the breach, the specimen was lost. Every time an instance was captured and contained near SCP-6448's habitat, it would later escape via similar tunnels. SCP-6448 was officially classified by the SCP Foundation in 1980, but those from the Appalachian region have known about these strange creatures since at least 1947. From folktales and campfire stories to secondhand and even first-hand encounters, the locals are aware of the Not Deer's existence and are largely familiar with the precautions necessary to avoid them. Though many of the civilians that encounter SCP-6448 avoid notifying the authorities, there have been several recorded 911 calls involving the Not Deer since 2000. The following is a log of those calls. February 1, 2000. Victim, age 41 female, dialed emergency services after hearing their name being called from the woods near their home. The victim recounts the vocalization being likened to a scream in a voice that they do not recognize, and requested assistance in locating the source. Emergency personnel requested the subject place their phone on the floor outside the home to listen for the alleged sounds. After 2 minutes, a vocalization was heard that was calling to the subject by name, emanating from the nearby forest. The subject was instructed to investigate the disturbance themselves and keep services updated on the situation. The victim then began to walk into the woodland, getting about 50 meters into the underbrush before inexplicably stopping. They claim there to be a noticeably large deer standing in the way of the path. She begins to walk closer, though states it does not move. Subject diverts from the path and begins walking in a different direction. After 30 minutes, no source of the voice is determined. The caller returns to their residence. June 13, 2002. Victim, age 28 male, calls 911 regarding a home break-in. The caller notes numerous items to be missing from their residence and requests an investigation. Operators dispatch 2 investigators to visit the home and pertain a potential perpetrator. The pair note that based on earlier CCTV images, all cutlery, sharp objects, firearms, light bulbs, and a single copy of the novel The Day After Roswell are missing.
Also noted is that there is a complete lack of any fingerprints at the scene, with no doors or windows having been broken into. Analysis of the home's CCTV footage revealed there to be a 2-hour period of missing film, with the exception of a single frame containing a Servus nippon on its hind legs reaching towards the camera. Its frontal hooves have been warped to resemble fingers. No footage of the entity exiting the home was discovered. November 19, 2005. A cattle farmer, age 54 male, reported to local authorities the sudden disappearance of over 30% of his largest herd. Response teams searched the nearby area for 4 hours, though found no trace of his cattle. The victim was recommended to set up trail cameras and note any unusual activity overnight. At 1:11 a.m., 2 SCPs 6448 are seen walking through the field before fleeing. One places an object into the ground, later discovered to be a single fork. A week after this discovery, 200 discarded bovine hooves appear at the location. March 4, 2009. Victim, age unknown, gender unknown, dials 911 to request assistance from animal services. The victim is standing within a forest in front of a Servus elephas, which is violently contorting. The victim attempts to state, "You better get a vet or something, I don't think it's well," before a piercing screech is heard and the line falls silent. Recovered footage depicts the aforementioned animal squirming, seemingly in pain. A vicious churning is audible as a black mass erupts out of the instance, and the video turns to static. October 11, 2012. Victim, age 23 male, is a junior wildlife officer at the Cherokee National Forest, Tennessee. They radio their supervisor in the early morning regarding a herd of Odicolius virginius within the reserve. Supposedly, there is a single animal that, upon first glance, appears average, though possesses divergent attributes, including backwards joints, enlarged abdomen, and forward-facing eyes. Upon stating this, a distant whistle is audible, and the victim stumbles slightly. They begin to say, "What the? Did it just whistle at me?" before the sound of hooves rapidly getting closer is heard. Notably, the hoofsteps did not sound to be in the traditional gallop of a cervid. October 12, 2012. The former victim's supervisor calls authorities following the victim's absence from the reserve night shift. Following this, their radio begins to crackle. The victim's voice can be heard on the other end, and he requests the supervisor's attention. He calls regarding a herd of Odicolius virginius within the reserve. They claim there is a single animal that upon first glance appears average, though possesses divergent attributes including backwards joints, enlarged abdomen, and forward-facing eyes. Suspecting the creature to be a rare genetic malformation, the victim requests their supervisor to come to the location. The supervisor questions the victim about what happened the night previous. There is no reply. Upon the supervisor's and law enforcement's arrival at the site, a herd of approximately 80 Odicolius virginius was present. A single entity is in the field's center and appears to be standing separate from the rest of the group. It flees the scene upon realizing the law enforcement's presence. Where it formerly stood lay a standard two-way radio. April 8, 2016. Victim, age 35 female, dials 911 using a satellite phone distressed. They state they are in redacted county woods and are being followed. She claims that despite seeing no one for the duration of her hike, she, quote, feels as if she's being watched and has heard someone walking behind her at various points in the trip. The victim is unable to give an adequate description of their location, but knows the route to return to her residence. Operators request the victim to return to a point wherein she can provide a sufficient geographic description of her position. The victim remains on the line for the duration of the hike back to a readily used portion of the wilderness trail. Along the journey, various unnatural sounds can be heard. These include footsteps, rock slides, coughing, whispering, and whistling. Nearing the main trail, all woodland noises such as birds and wind cease suddenly, and the victim states she can see a malformed deer carcass coated in a thick layer of black slime. At this time, human screams can be heard in the distance. Operators request the victim continue and ignore the other stimuli. Agents embedded in local law enforcement, suspecting SCP-6448 involved, notify Gamma 4 to the situation. 20 minutes later, the victim returns to the main trail. Gamma 4, now operating the 911 call, informs the victim not to respond to any further unusual activity and briefly outlines service protocol. For the duration of the victim's journey to her home, 2 sets of breathing are audible. The victim successfully returns to her residence and shuts the door behind her.
Now out of sight from SCP-6448, agents inquire of the victim's address, and the victim promptly complies. Operatives instruct the victim to have possession of all firearms and weapons on the premises and to barricade herself inside a safe space with one exit point. The victim swiftly begins grabbing all available weapons and throwing them inside a wardrobe. It is at this time there's a knock on the front door. The victim does not respond and continues to hoard sharp objects from kitchen drawers. The knocking becomes more violent as the handle is jostled and is shaken incessantly. A voice on the other side repeats the phrase, "Hello, it is me. Hello, let me in a calm manner as the door begins to shake. The victim retreats to her wardrobe, armed with a small firearm. Upon sealing herself in the space, the knocking ceases, and footsteps can be heard becoming further away. The sound of galloping is audible as the front door caves in. Hoofsteps can now be heard inside the home. The entity continues to repeat, "Hello, it is me. Hello, let me in," as it searches the small building. A bright light flashes overhead, seemingly circling the house. Eventually, the entity enters the victim's bedroom. Through a small slit in the wardrobe door, the victim can see a Cervus canadensis standing on its hind legs and surveying the room. Its movements are crooked and stiff, seeming to struggle to stand in a bipedal fashion. It slouches down to a quadrupedal crouch, similar to the stance of an arachnid. It inhales heavily, and its head locks on the view of the wardrobe. It is noted as possessing human eyes. It scampers towards the subject and opens the door. A single gunshot is heard. Responders found no trace of either SCP-6448 or the victim. Containment of SCP-6448 is focused on the investigation of any deer exhibiting anomalous traits in and around the Appalachian area. Any civilian sightings of SCP-6448 are to be handled by Mobile Task Force Gamma-4, or the Green Stags. Any possible deaths resulting from SCP-6448 will be blamed on hiking accidents, and any reported sightings can be explained away with chronic wasting disease. CWD, occasionally referred to as zombie deer disease, is a prion disease affecting members of the Cervidae family. Symptoms of the illness include loss of motor function control and damage to decision-making, as well as gradual degradation of all mental faculties. It is 100% fatal. However, though the disease does exist, most recorded cases of it in the Appalachian region can actually be attributed to instances of SCP-6448. Any captured instances of SCP-6448 should be transported to Site-44 for the Cryptozoology Division's containment and study. On November 29, 2019, they finally got their chance to bring a not deer into custody. The Green Stags were able to capture an instance of SCP-6448 with the help from MTF Nu 7 Hammerdown and their Heavy Vehicles Division, as well as some experimental shock rifles. One not deer was knocked unconscious in the conflict, and its body was loaded onto an armored helicopter and flown straight to Site-44 in Essex, England. At the site, it was then placed in a reinforced steel containment cell and heavily sedated. This entire process went off without a hitch. As the entity began to regain consciousness, cryptozoology specialist F. Oz watched it through a one-way glass window and attempted to speak to it through the intercom. "Greetings, SCP-6448, Researcher Oz began. At the sound of his voice, the creature jumped to its feet, staring at the intercom. "Can you understand me? We've seen your genus speak English just fine in the past." The animal did not answer, but began licking one of its legs and behaving as if it were an ordinary deer. Researcher Oz sighed impatiently. "Please, we know your secret." The not deer stopped what it was doing, freezing completely still as it listened to the words. "Admittedly, it wasn't exactly well kept. If you just look at yourself for more than a few seconds, it is very clear that you're not normal." At this, the creature, which had been facing away from the window, swiveled its neck 180 degrees, breaking its own spine with an audible crack. It stared unblinking at the window and directly at Researcher Oz. Oz turned to the containment staff, suddenly anxious. "I thought you said this was one way." The staff assured him that it was, and there was no way the not deer could see him. Still, its eyes were locked directly on his face. He shook off the sense of unease and continued his line of questioning. "Are you something imitating deer? It is clear that if so, you possess basic anatomical knowledge of them, though details are clearly faulty. In fact, a better question would be, how, if in fact you are not what you pretend to be?" The not deer opened its mouth at this, revealing unusually sharp teeth. It moved its jaw as if attempting to speak, but only a choking sound came out. Shall we move on? Oz asked. What I'm more concerned with here is why you take our people. Is it a vendetta? Spite? Food? For the first time in the interview, the not deer blinked. It was an unnatural movement, forced and deliberate, like the creature was attempting to engage in an ordinary behavior rather than actually experiencing an involuntary impulse. Responding is mandatory, researcher Oz prompted. The creature did not react. If you will not comply, Oz's tone grew stern, frustrated. Maybe you'd like to see your brand new containment cell. At last the entity spoke. Research. Its voice resembled a distorted version of Oz's. Research? What kind of... Oz wasn't able to finish his question. July 7th, 1947, the creature said before ramming into the one-way glass and cracking it. As Oz stumbled backwards from the force, the creature collapsed on the ground, seizing and screaming as its abdomen. Get the stags in here now! Oz cried out, but it was too late. A black mass of something shiny and tendrilled leaped out of the not deer, scuttling around the cell before shattering the window and leaving the empty shell of a deer behind. The Site-44 breach system activated and attempted to initiate emergency containment protocols, but the mysterious black mass escaped its sector, made its way toward the main exit, broke through the glass of the front exit door, and vanished into the shrubbery outside. The escaped anomaly could not be found and recontained. Ever since this incident, there have been a record-breaking number of chronic wasting disease cases identified in deer in the surrounding area, as well as an unprecedented increase in UFO reports. Further research is currently ongoing, but it is unknown whether we will ever truly know what these creatures are. Only one thing is for certain. They are definitely not deer. Now go check out SCP-968 Sleep Killer and SCP-2571 Cragglewood Park for more anomalies that'll ensure you'll never want to sleep again. Wait, is that a deer behind you? Oh God!